Right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome along to this meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee on Wednesday, 22nd of April, 2026. At the top table, we have here Scott Walker, our Head of Finance. Next to me is Eric Anderson as Vice Convener, and also as, what did I say?
Eric Anderson.
Oh, I'm just distracted. Eric Drysdale as our Vice Convener and also as Council Leader. My good self, Kirsten as our Clerk, and also Lisa Simpson. And I know, for instance, Claire Mailer is online. But is anyone else to? Yeah, what I will do though, first of all, is usual rules apply. But I will read out the pre-election statement. We had the same at Economy and Infrastructure this morning when Grant Lang read out the same thing, but we're mandated to do this. So I would point out that the Scottish Parliament elections, as I think you'll all know, take place on 7th of May, and that's 2 weeks tomorrow. As such, there may be a heightened sensitivity around what is said and done in the period leading up to polling day. Broadly, the Local Government Act 1986 prohibits the Council from publishing material which is designed to affect public support for a political party or campaign. Normal council business obviously continues, but as always, council resources, staff and facilities cannot be used for political purposes. Any events, publicity or other communications promoted by the Council must always be politically neutral. Further guidance, if required, is available from the Chief Executive or from the Elections Manager. So, you've heard, I think a number of you have heard that before, but we just have to do that, and it's right and it's proper. Now, I'm going to ask Kirsten as Clerk to advise us of any apologies and also to ask members online to confirm their presence when Kirsten calls out their name, so that this is clear in the recording of the meeting and for the accuracy of the minutes. So Kirsten, do proceed.
Thank you, Convener. We have an apology from Councillor Allen with Councillor James substituting, and an apology from Councillor Cuthbert with Councillor Lane substituting. We have a few members joining us online this afternoon, so when I call out your name, could you please confirm you're present? Councillor James.
Hi, Kirsten. Present.
Thank you. Provost McDade.
Present. Thanks.
Thank you. And Councillor Shires.
Present.
Thank you. All their members are present in the Chambers, Convener.
Thanks, Kirsten. Right, next point is the usual one, declarations of interest. Does any member of this committee have any interest to declare? There being no one, I shall now proceed to the minutes of the last meeting. And that was does anyone, that was the meeting on the 4th of February. Does anyone have any points to raise, or is that a fair reflection of that meeting? Are we good? Good. Right. And secondly, we have the Employees Joint Consultative Committee minute, and that's of 3rd of December. Does anyone have any comments on that, or can we agree on that? Everyone agreed? Okay. We now proceed then to the next item on the agenda, and that's about memorial safety in council cemeteries. And it's a motion that's been put forward by the Provost, Sandra McDade, and it's also going to be seconded by Colin Stewart. And yeah, sure, point of clarification, that's fine. Bailiff
sorry I didn't ask this at the time, but we have in the index minute of the meeting of the Finance and Resources of 4th of February, but the minutes that are actually in the pack are for the 26th of November. So are they the minutes, or is the date incorrect? Thank you.
Right, we now have the motion that's been put forward by Provost McDade. He is online, but he is with us. It's about memorial safety in council cemeteries, and I accepted this motion to be considered. It may well be that it comes back to, if it was agreed today, the June meeting of Finance and Resources. There could be potential budgetary implications. There may not. But I'm going to hand over to Provost McDade. Xander.
Thank you very much, convener, and thank you for allowing this motion today. As I introduce the motion today, I think it's important to stress that Perth and Kinross Council takes its statutory health and safety obligations very seriously, and obviously the current Memorial Safety in Council Cemeteries programme is designed to comply with those statutory obligations and the national guidance. The national guidance was introduced as the result of a fatal accident inquiry into the tragic death of a child, and the Scottish Government subsequently brought those changes into legislation last year to ensure that all burial authorities implemented the national guidance. The Council doesn't receive any additional Scottish Government funding to undertake this additional statutory obligation, and it does cost the Council a significant sum of money to ensure that we are complying with that obligation. I believe it's around £160,000. For those not familiar with the details of the programme, under the programme the Council will inspect all council cemeteries every 5 years, and if a headstone is found to be unsafe, it will be laid flat for 3 months and the layer owner will be contacted to advise them. If it remains unrepaired after 3 months, then Perth and Kinross Council undertakes a process which is known as socketing, or also in some of the guidance it's called trenching. And that's a process where about 1/3 of the headstone is placed below the ground in front of the foundation to allow the stone to remain upright. This process doesn't damage the stone and allows for it to be reinstated at a later date if it is desired, but it does allow for grounds maintenance to take place as well. Where there is minor movement of a stone identified, then the headstone will be re-inspected after 2 years. A yellow warning sign is placed at the memorial to inform visitors so that they can potentially undertake works to have it repaired. The programme has recently been carrying out inspections in Pitlochry at Fonab Cemetery, where a significantly higher proportion of stones were laid flat than the Perth and Kinross average. I think it was about 20% roughly in Pitlochry, and the average is something closer to about 12 or 14%. And for Victorian headstones, it's actually lower, it's about 10%. So Pitlochry has a number of cemeteries. Fonab is the newer of the cemeteries, and that perhaps explains the higher failure rate, as it were. This has understandably been very distressing for the families of the loved ones the memorials affected. And I think there's been a general acknowledgement that there needs to be a greater awareness both of the process and of the planned inspections before they occur. The Council currently does post notices at affected cemeteries ahead of inspection programme taking place at that cemetery, and also contacts local elected members. And following feedback recently, the Memorial Safety Team have also created an explanatory video which helps to aid understanding of the process and how it works for members of the public. Over the last month or so, I've engaged along with other elected members with the bereavement services team around opportunities to improve both communication and also potential options to change how the process is currently carried out. I'm very grateful for their time in that. And the motion today is here to get the agreement of elected members with formalising that process, that officers will work with elected members on an enhanced memorial safety in council cemeteries programme that will provide more engagement with layer owners and the local community, and also bring the cost of implementation of those required enhancements to the June Finance and Resources Committee. That is obviously why it's here today, because there would potentially be in-year costs applied that would need to come and be approved by Finance and Resources, and that is why the committee is being asked to support this. And I hope that, given the very sensitive issue, that this will receive cross-party support from the committee today, and allow for those implementations to be worked on a cross-party basis with officers and brought back to the June Finance and Resources Committee. And I'm very happy to take any points of clarification, convener, if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. And for moving the motion, to second the motion, can I call on Colin Stewart, Councillor Stewart?
Thank you, convener. I don't have anything really to add to what the Provost said, just that I'm sure that all elected members will recognise what an emotive issue this can be for families. So happy to formally second, convener.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to make a comment? Councillor Duff, John.
Thank you, convener. As the Provost has said, this has been particularly challenging and difficult time within the Highland Ward with the headstone inspections, both in Aberfeldy and in the Pitlochry area, and I very much welcome the motion and allow us to discuss, any changes to the way forward that would help to improve the process. So thanks very much for the motion, which I support. Thank you.
Councillor Lane, Grant.
Similar to you had this morning.
Yeah. I eventually had to go through about 4 different sets.
I just perseverance for me. I fully support the motion, but I've just got a couple of questions. How did we get to be doing this in the first place without thinking of along the lines of doing the possibilities that the motion has brought forward? That's the first question. And do we have, because there's been out, any ballpark figure of what the costs are going to be, or are there going to be a range of different mitigations brought forward for us to decide on which the best one and the cost for that one when the paper comes back to us? Thanks.
Could I just say the motion, I accepted the motion for consideration. It was in on time. It did have potential budgetary implications, but I can't give a figure on that. And I think that will be dependent on the engagement process between elected members and council officers. So I believe I did the appropriate and correct thing, and there will be a report back to Finance and Resources at the meeting. I think it's towards the end of June. So.
Sorry, can I come back, because that wasn't the question asked, and I know that you've handled it properly, and I welcome the motion. The motion was, how did we get to the position that we were laying down 20% of the gravestones as a local authority before it's been brought to attention that we're actually having to look at it? And the costs I'm asking for is not from you, but have officers done are we going to get a range of different mitigation things to come when it comes back to us to choose from, attached with costs of each different mitigation? Thank you.
I'm going to ask with the agreement, the committee, for the Provost to make some comment, because I think you want to assist here. Xander?
Yeah, I mean, I can perhaps help support address some of Councillor Lane's question in the form of a point of clarification and answer to that clarification. So one of the discussions that we've been having with the bereavement services team is around the opportunity to enhance communication with layer owners ahead of the inspection, so writing to affected layer owners for whom we have contact details ahead of inspection. That would require additional administrative staffing capacity within the bereavement services team to support that, and obviously there would then be associated postage costs. The staffing cost for that is somewhere around £40,000, just under possibly, plus the associated postage costs. So that maybe gives members a bit of an idea of the ballpark cost of that. I think we would be looking at trying to manage other aspects of changes in the process within the existing staffing team. So hopefully that gives members a bit of an idea of the sort of ballpark that we would be looking at. But I think it's quite important to have that engagement process over the coming couple of months before the financial costs are brought back to committee in June. And obviously, as convener of economy and infrastructure, I would expect Councillor Lane will be heavily involved in those discussions.
Okay, thanks. Before I move on to Councillor Alan Watt, Tom McEwen, you've got a point of clarification.
I'm not sure whether the other councillors have got points of clarification as well, and they put comment in the box, but I'll leave it up to yourself to chair your committee. I completely support what the motion suggests. I have no issue with this. My confusion, I suppose, comes from that it's not a service committee that is here. So we've just had at my service committee a paper about mid-market rent, so that the actual function of the service could be discussed by the councillors who scrutinise and question the service. And of course that paper is then going to go to full council for the financial implications that it has, so that it can be passed by full council. My expectations is a paper like this would go to a service committee, and if there was an ask for extra money outside of that service's current budget, then that would come to finance and resources, because it wouldn't be borrowing, it would be spend on current budget. So that is the sort of confusion to me that is coming and tells it that direction. Otherwise, it looks like F&R is going to start running the service committees, telling them what services are to supply. I get that there's a financial implication that has to come here. I'm surprised that it's come in that direction. So I suppose that's my point of clarity about the process, not the motion at all, but the actual process and the committees that it's come to.
I'm going to come back to, I've got a comment to make in a second, but to the Provost. Xander.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's obviously here in part because we're actually hoping to get additional financial resource and not for it to come out of existing council service budget, and therefore it would come out of reserves in this year and then be managed through the budgetary process next year. So I think that's one of the things that I would stress about why it is at F&R rather than at the service committee. It is also not at the service committee because it technically is currently a process that is not a policy as such. So there has never been a policy approved at a council committee on this matter. It is an operational process at the moment. So we are also effectively, the involvement of elected members in this space is around the financial approval of additional funds, and the actual operational process is determined by staff, although we've got an undertaking from officers that they will work with elected members on the revision of that operational process, and then the elected members can approve the additional financial resource required to implement that through F&R. I think if it was to go to a service committee, it would then potentially be blurring the lines as to why it isn't at that service committee as a full-blown policy.
Can I just say to Councillor McEwen, under no circumstances was I looking to undermine service committees, including his own, where I did take the view when the motion appeared, we had to take a decision. I took the decision because it did have potential budgetary implications, but we don't know the figures as yet, and it's in year. It was appropriate in this instance to come to Finance and Resources, and then going forward would be potentially part of the overall budgetary process. So I think there's also a question. There had been quite a bit of coverage, especially events at Fonab and Dysart cemeteries at Pitlochry. So it was topical. I didn't want a situation that this was going to be drawn out, and hopefully the engagement, how that's carried out, we will have to determine, but hopefully we can come back with a proper report at the Finance and Resources in June. So that's what I am going to say. Councillor McKeon again.
Just quickly, I think we'll have to discuss this further with Democratic Services to get more detail outside the committee, because it's a bit of a process thing rather than the motion itself. I'm no issue with the motion. I'm happy for things to proceed. I think further discussion and clarity, so we're not setting a precedent, is needed from me, but we can do that outside of this committee. Thank you.
Okay, but I did take the view, given the potential timeline and the sensitivity of the matter, that it was appropriate in this instance. And I did think of putting to one or two other committees. I thought it was we could expedite the position more effectively and more timeously. And that's, you may disagree. I'm going to take comments as well now from Councillor Alan Watt. Alan.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you, convener. Yeah, I fully support this motion, and I agree with Tom. Maybe that process maybe needs to be looked at, but this process, which has had to be taking place, has caused a great deal of distress to families across my ward and the wider Perth and Kinross area, and anything we can do to take the shock out of it with better communication is welcome in my eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Eric, Councillor Drysdale.
Testing. Yeah, working now. Okay. Yeah, just a kind of question for yourself, Provost. I'm completely supportive of this in principle. I just wanted to confirm that your understanding accords with mine, which is that the relevant legislation and guidance from Scottish Government does afford each local authority considerable discretion as to how it goes about its statutory responsibilities, and it isn't prescriptive in terms of things like timetable for notifying families, etc. It does allow that flexibility, so that if we were to, for example, end up with a process that did give that extra time for families to respond, that is not in breach of any regulations. That's my understanding. Is that yours?
Xander?
Yes, I think the national guidance is that. So there's legislation and there is guidance. So there was guidance brought in 2019, and there is also legislation that was brought in 2025 to basically enforce the guidance in part. There is obviously quite wide-ranging discretion, as there is on a lot of statutory obligations, as to how the council chooses to implement that. So, for example, some councils will cordon off headstones, some will just lay them flat, they won't socket them, because the socketing is effectively an extra cost that the council would then incur. So different local authorities do have different implementations. one of the things that I would hope that would come out of this process is things that we might consider. So Angus Council, for example, does not charge for the change of ownership of burial of layers. So that's a cost that families potentially have to incur before they can make changes to a layer. So to reinstate a headstone, for example. So I think there's quite a lot of areas of implementation here that the council has discretion over within that are still within the guidance and within the legislation that we can have a discussion around the implementation of, and that is also where some of this may incur financial cost, for example. And I think that's one of the main reasons that I would like this discussion between elected members and officers over the coming months to explore what we are interested and keen to support in these changes.
Yeah, thanks, Sandra. That's super. Thanks.
Okay, I'm now going to call on Councillor Caroline Charles. Caroline, I think you're online.
Thank you, convener. I very much welcome this motion. Thank you to the Provost for bringing it forward. And whilst recognising this has been a result of your experience up in Highland Ward, I just wanted to make it really clear that this has been ongoing. I met with us on the 3rd of September last year, raising concerns about issues at Blairgowrie Cemetery and raised issues about communication in the video, and was very much welcoming that's now happening. It's very frustrating that it's however many months have passed since those discussions took place, and the upset and concern of local residents has been quite clear to all of us elected members. So I very much welcome this. I was going to raise the point about Angus Council. I think there's a lot of learnings that we can make from good practice in other local authorities. Thank you.
Caroline, thanks. And I think probably the final comment is Baillie Ahern, and I'm very conscious that it's Baillie Ahern who moved in the budget for the annual funding of 50,000 per annum for war memorials. But Chris, I think your final comment.
Thank you very much. And yes, and thank you for that money. So I've spent several hours this morning looking over the legislation and guidance in terms of maintenance of war memorials and war graves. And my concern is that if we have headstones that are of national significance, maybe a VC, there are guidelines around what you can do and can't do. And so if there is a grave that is of national importance or is covered under the War Graves Commission, then there will need to be guidance taken place. We have, as a working party now created in the council, to look at the spending of the funding with returns to war graves and memorials, and we will bring that up at the next. And the first meeting of that was yesterday. So we are now moving forward in terms of the war memorials, but when it comes to the war graves, there may be occasions where you can't just simply take it up and put it down flat, because there will be guidance around it and some require planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for those comments. And yes, I can indeed see the linkage. Right, finally, can I ask Xander, as the mover of the motion, do you wish to sum up?
I think just to say thank you to members across the chamber for supporting the motion today. And I think we obviously all have experiences in our own wards where these issues have perhaps arisen, and I think that learning from across Perth and Kinross will be useful as we engage with the team on changes to the process. And indeed, as Councillor Shires mentioned, that there is potential learning from other local authorities now that different local authorities have been implementing this over the last few years. We'll be able to see what is best practice from across the country and ensure that we are implementing that, as well as bringing back the costs of any changes and perhaps, as Councillor Lane earlier mentioned, different costs against different options as well, depending on where we get to in those discussions. So thank you very much just to everyone for their support on this matter today.
Provost, thank you. Then can we agree the motion? That's agreed unanimously, and thank you, Provost, for bringing that forward. and it is clearly a matter of sensitivity. I think what will be important is the engagement process, and it may well be that there are matters we're not fully aware of at the moment, but it's hopefully we can proceed fairly rapidly with that process and with a report coming back to Finance Resources at the end of June. Right. Next business, item 5, the outstanding business statement, and there was a briefing note sent out on that on residual waste on the 14th of April, so that matter is completed. So can we now proceed to item 6, and that's the revenue budget update, the 4th update to the ledger to the end of January, and some of the data on council tax collection is more recent than that. But can I ask, as Chief Finance Officer, can I ask Scott Walker to introduce the report? Thank you, Scott.
So, excuse me, thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. Before I start, I'd like to apologise for the small technical issue that required us to repost some of the appendices yesterday. This report provides Revenue Monitoring Update number 4 for the 25-26 financial year. It is based on the January ledger position, updated for any known material movements since then. It also includes a small number of updates to 26-27 to ensure that the budgets remain aligned with service delivery. Overall, the Council is projecting a net underspend on the General Fund of £2.501 million. That equates to around 0.5% of the revised management budget and represents a positive improvement of £267,000 since the last update to the committee. This position reflects continued active management across services, favourable movements on staffing, energy and income. It does sit alongside some ongoing demand-led and inflationary pressures in a small number of services, which remain tightly monitored. Turning to individual services, education and learning continue to show a net underspend with an increase of £291,000, largely driven by staffing movements, particularly in the nursery and secondary sectors. That said, pressures do remain in parts of the primary sector. Children, Families and Justice is now projecting a £50,000 overspend, which represents an adverse movement of £205,000 since my last update. This is entirely demand-led and relates to residential childcare placements where both the number of placements and the length of stay has increased and where slippage has not been achieved. Economy, Development and Planning shows an increased net underspend of £55,000 with additional staff slippage across the function and income within Development Management and Building Standards, helping to offset pressures within Tourism, Culture and Place, where reduced event income and the delayed delivery of savings has impacted upon the projection. In Environment and Infrastructure, the overall position has improved by £50,000 since the last update. Importantly, despite some concerns expressed at my last update, we do not anticipate any call on unearmarked reserves in the current 25-26 relating to severe weather. Housing and Communities continues to experience pressure with an increase in the projected overspend of £119,000, largely due to income shortfalls within bereavement services. Across the remainder of the Council, including Property Services, Customer and Digital Services, Strategic Planning, People and Performance, and Finance and Business Support, underspends do continue, largely reflecting staffing and energy-related movements. Turning briefly to the tragic fire at Scott Street, the Council has incurred around £2.3 million in 25-26 responding to the incident, with a further £300,000 expected post 1st of April. Based on interim invoices issued, insurance recoveries that we're aware of, Scottish Government support and the Council's previous commitment, there is no anticipated further impact on the Council's unearmarked reserves in 25-26 arising from the incident. As works complete and final invoices are raised and paid, members will receive a further and hopefully final update in the next monitoring report, which will come to you in June. On council tax collection, I do need to provide a slight update. The actual level of in-year council tax collection for 25-26 was 97.48%. Unfortunately, the figure quoted in the report is the 5-year average, so 97.48% is the actual in-year collection. Therefore, as is stated in the report, the 25-26 in-year figure was 0.27% better than the 5-year average and 0.14% better than last year. Given the challenges facing households, this is a fantastic effort, I would like to place on record my thanks to the local taxes teams. Turning to reserves, the report includes a number of planned and transparent movements consistent with the Council's reserve strategy and previously approved decisions. In the main, these are not reactive measures and do not mask underlying pressures. Rather, they reflect the planned use of reserves to manage timing differences, support one-off costs and manage known risks. Based on the latest monitoring, unearmarked general fund reserves are projected to stand at £17.48 million at the 31st of March. That represents 3.5%, which is within the Council's approved target range of between 2 and 4%, and reflects a further improvement since my last update. Members will also note a small number of workforce planning measures within the report. They include changes to probation arrangements and engagement on pay and grading at the lower end of the pay scales. Taken together, these measures are intended to manage costs responsibly while supporting recruitment, retention and service resilience. Finally, members should note that this report also updates the approved 26-27 revenue budget, reflecting additional funding, requirements and planned reserve drawdowns to ensure that next year's budget continues to reflect operational reality and previously agreed commitments. In summary, this is a balanced and controlled position. We are projecting an underspend with reserves within strategy and with no immediate call on unearmarked reserves for major unforeseen events. However, the report continues to highlight persistent demand-led pressures, particularly within care-related services, which will remain a central issue as we move into 26-27 and beyond. Convener, colleagues and I are happy to take questions. Thank you.
Scott, thank you very much. And also, it's encouraging that there will be a final monitoring report at the June meeting of this committee. I think that's the second year running when we will have the position up to 31st of March, and that kind of aligns with our annual report and accounts. Could I now ask for questions? First question is from Councillor Rebick. John.
Thank you very much, Convener. I note the level of overspend last year on visitor rangers, which is mentioned in Appendix 2 actually. I'm wondering if someone can set out the total funding directed to this service, firstly by Scottish Government during COVID and thereafter by this administration. And if I may, can I also ask for clarification in terms of the numbers of frontline staff in the recently consolidated community support and enforcement team compared with the staff and levels of the previous constituent parts of the team, please.
Thanks, John. Scott, first of all. Okay, is Hunter Hope online? Oh, it's here.
Yes,
sorry, I didn't see you.
Thanks, Convener, and thanks for the question. The Visitor Ranger or Visitor Management Service was introduced in 2020, and it came about because of post-lockdown visitor pressures. It was supported by Scottish Government funding streams, and it went towards infrastructure and ranger deployment. In 2021, funding continued for the Scottish Government, but it was at a reduced level, and it was reduced still further in 2022. To be more specific around the funding in 2020, the Scottish Government grant was 350,000. In 2021, it had dropped to 300,000. In 2022, another very significant drop down to 150,000. And that made the model that we were working with at that time unsustainable. In 2023, therefore, the Council provided a one-off, non-recurring £240,000 allocation to maintain what was a basic service. In 23-24, the funding was provided again, and Nature Scot added a further £83,000 to the pot. In 24-25, funding was again provided through the budget settlement, and this year it was £250,000 non-recurring. There was no further money from Nature Scot. In 25-26, visitor management was consolidated into the new and wider community support and enforcement team. No additional funding was provided, but at that point in time, savings were made to the general fund of £250,000 per annum by virtue of that consolidation. So in summer of last year, pressures led to a £100,000 budget pressure. And that was because we had additional patrols, we brought in portaloos, and we had an expanded waste uplift service. And that was all due to further increased footfall. You'll remember some wildfires that we experienced that year, and the fact that the new consolidated team was taking time to get up to speed and had some significant vacancies. For 2026, £50,000 was provided through the budget setting process. Back before consolidation of the teams, the visitor management service consisted of 10 casual or seasonal visitor rangers, 1 coordinator and 1 assistant coordinator. On top of that, you asked about the staffing profile of parking services prior to consolidation, and I can tell you that prior to consolidation we had 28 officers. We had a team leader, an occupational therapist who was engaged in the Blue Badge service, and 6 clerical admin business support operative. Total cost of that was £1.5 million. After consolidation, and our ambition as of now is that when full recruitment has taken place, we will have 48 frontline officers. We will have a team leader and 4 coordinators. The occupational therapist remains, and we have 2 investigators. We still have 6 back office staff to support all of that activity. The cost of that is just shy of £3 million, and it's funded largely by the parking account at just under £2 million. General fund £870,000, a contribution from the housing revenue account, and so those are the main sources of funding. I think that's everything you asked for, Councillor. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. I notice, Councillor Lane, you've got a question related to John Revick's question. However, I think in terms of the order in which questions have been asked, can I ask if it's Deputy Provost, is your question related to? No, it's separate. Anyone else that follows? Right, I'm going to take Councillor Lane, okay? All right, Councillor Massey, you are first in the queue then, fine.
Thank you. On the back of the answers that you've just given, Councillor Revick, Hunter, can you just clarify my understanding is correct on the same topic? The community support and enforcement team redeployment to Pooler House, is this measure meant that you can implement improved surveillance of hotspots and maybe give a better response to developing incidents when they're happening?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. Convener, the purpose of the Community Safety and Enforcement Team is to tackle challenging behaviour wherever it occurs across our footprint, and that's what we aim to do with the resources that we have. We do that by having highly visible patrols, visibility being the key, engaging with the public and reassuring them, working with businesses to reassure businesses, and we use the Shop Safe radio system to communicate in the city and with police colleagues. We try to provide early intervention to nip things in the bud before they become real problems and escalate. We are the eyes and ears for the council in reporting graffiti, street defects and road defects. At a leadership level, we have regular meetings with partners, police, businesses, etc., and make sure that we're coordinated as far as we can be. You'll find the team on duty in the city beats in Perth. You'll find them throughout our towns throughout the year, and you'll find that they'll move to hotspots as and when is required. In terms of visitor ranger deployment, that was last year largely in the areas of Loch Looney, Loch Tummel and Loch Rannoch. But where possible and where required, we deployed to Glen Lyon, Kenmore, Loch Leven, Moncrieff Island and Dunning so the footprint was right across the piece. You asked in particular about surveillance, and I was lucky that before I came into the meeting today, I popped in to speak to colleagues in the Community Safety and Enforcement team down in Pillar House, and they showed me around the new control room that we have. And in the control room, we have eyes on from the CCTV cameras in the city, in Crieff, Auchterarder, Broxton Park and Ride, and the bus station. And we anticipate that will be fully functional within the next week or so. And when that is fully functional, will deploy one individual to be on point there, looking at all of these areas continuously when we're on shift. And our shift patterns, interestingly, now are 7:45 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. So we have pretty good coverage there as a result of that consolidation. So the answer to your question is yes. I anticipate that by moving to Pillar House and consolidating, we will be in a better place to build on the knowledge that we already have of the locations which in the past have been places where challenging behaviour has been a problem. And we'll be able to build on that by working closely with colleagues and police at Pillar House and using CCTV, and also, and I'll finish on this, maintaining relationships with community resilience groups who are our eyes and ears right across our footprint. Thank
you. Councillor Duff. John, you have a point of clarification.
Thank you. Yes, it was just in relation to the answer given by Hunter in relation to the funding of visitor rangers, and forgive me if I did miss it, but there was a lot of information given there. My understanding would have been that there was £240,000 put into visitor ranger service by the previous Conservative administration in 2021-22 and again in 22-23, but I'm not sure if you mentioned that during the various details that you gave. Could you confirm that for me, please?
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. My information could be incorrect, but the information that I have and that I've shared with you today is that in 2022, we had £150,000 in the pot, and that was Scottish Government funding. And in moving into 2022-23, we had £240,000 one-off non-recurrent. So that might be where the ambiguity was, Councillor.
Okay, John.
Thank you. No, I'm looking at a motion from March 2022, and it was continued funding of £240,000 for the pilot ranger service to support our communities with visitor management issues, etc., etc. So that in 2021, £240,000 I think was approved for the ranger service for 21-22 and again for 22-23. So I think there was a total of £480,000 in the budget in March 21 for visitor rangers that you've not covered. Thank you.
Happy to come back to you on that, Councillor, once I've went back to check the figures, if that's okay.
Okay, I will come to Councillor Lane, but I have another point of clarification, and that has to take precedence. Provost McDade.
Yes, no, it was actually just along similar lines to Councillor Duff there. I secured as part of the budget process from the then administration £480,000, £240,000 for each year in 2021 and 2022 for a pilot for the visitor ranger scheme, and then in I think it was August 22, Bailey Brock, and I think it was yourself, convener, brought a motion to council to make the service permanent, and that was to be managed through the budget process in February of 2023. under this administration. That is my recollection of the figures, and I think any additional funding from Scottish Government was on top of what had been agreed by the council, because there was a wider visitor management range of measures that were undertaken post-COVID, where we were experiencing severe pressures at that point.
Thank you. Right, I'm not overlooking Deputy Provost Barrett, nor am I overlooking Colin Stewart. I'm trying to take the questions on this matter together. So can I call Councillor Grant Lane? Grant.
Thanks, Provost. Oh, God. Councillor, sorry about that. Provost. Provost up there. Sorry, Convener. You know, this is interesting stuff and it's very important service. Why are we talking about this today? The visitor service, the figures were known in, before the budget. It's been monitored, as you will recall, being convener. It was 94,000 overspent at the last committee meeting. It was overspent at the previous committee meeting. But now we're into the thing. The visitor rangers will be trained up. Hopefully the portaloos will be out. So I was wondering why this has suddenly peaked attention today and not brought up during the budget process.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the Vice Convener and Council Leader to respond. Eric.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Lane, for your question. You're absolutely right. The situation is that at budget time, information was received that led us to the position that the council budget was eventually set at. What has the points that have been made by other contributors already this afternoon? You know, this isn't or shouldn't be a party political issue. That, you know, this is something I think they're all keen to ensure that we support. So we need to clarify for the record, since the point has been asked about which administration came up with which contributions, etc. I will make a contribution later, and I would at that point in time look to clarify how we came to be in this position. But essentially, to answer your question now, it is on the basis of information that was received at budget time. But it's recognised that that there is an issue here that we need to address.
Thank you. That makes some clarity now, and I think we'd all want to ensure that the visitor service is given as much funding as necessary, especially in rural areas. So thanks. I just didn't understand how we're getting to this position today when it was well known previously of the situation. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lane. And yeah, we can go back 3-4 years. I must listen into the video of what Provost said, what I said in August 22. But I think the important thing is where we are now and where we go from here. And if we can get, if possible, broad agreement on this, and I think that does matter. Right, any further questions on the visitor service specifically, or are people wanting now to raise other matters? I'm trying to do it this way so we don't end up, you know, we're disjointed. Okay, next question I'm going to take is from Deputy Provost Andrew Parrott. Andrew.
Thank you, Convener. I'm on page 21, paragraph 4.18. It's very welcome that there's a projected underspend of $250,000 in waste disposal, but I'm interested to know whether that is the additional income from recyclates. Is that essentially because we are recycling more, or is it more to do with the price we are getting for those recyclates at the moment? Thank you.
Thanks. I think that's either Fraser Crofts or Pete Leonard. Is Pete about?
Yep. Thank you, Convener, and thank you for the question, Councillor. Primarily, it is in relation to the price that we're getting. I mean, the tonnages do vary from month to month, as does the price as well. So we are seeing a slight increase in the price, and that is forecast to continue due to the pressures on the industries from the war in Iran. We are anticipating actually that prices may increase during the course of the coming 12 months as well. But in terms of the increase, in terms of the question, it's mainly in relation to the increased income. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Now, if I did miss anyone out, just throw up your hands, let us know. But I think we're back to the sequence again. So I'm going to ask Councillor Colin. Stuart Colin, to ask your question.
Thanks, convener. I've got two questions, but they're on distinct areas, so I'll come in separately afterwards on a second question. My first question is on section 426, where we're talking about the management of the AK Bell Library archives transferring from CPK, presumably back to the council. And I just wondered what the reason for making a management change like that was, A, and B, whether that has any effect on the rates position, given that CPK gets charitable rates, but the council doesn't.
Who's best to answer here? Lisa?
So I think there's just a little bit of clarification. What's actually transferred back is the corporate records management function that the archivist used to do for us, not actually, you know, the sort of archives in terms of the public facing and whatnot. So it's that bit which is more in line with the corporate records management. So we've transferred line management of some of the staff, but they're still based in AK Bell and they're still doing other support in terms of the wider archives and the genealogy and all of that. That's not transferred to us. It was about looking at the corporate management, the corporate records management functionality. And the reason for that was because in discussion with Culture PK, they didn't feel that they could do that statutory part of the role as effectively at an arm's length, and it would be better if it was part of our wider corporate records management. So that bit's been integrated, so it's under the same leadership, and it's more tailored into, so it's ensuring that the statutory part of the archiving function as it relates to corporate records management is managed under the council control. I don't think it makes any impact on the rates.
If it did, it'd be, I think, very minor, but yeah, I hear what you say. Yeah. In a little while, Colin. Right, let us see on the yeah, it is. Councillor John Duff. John?
Thank you. My question was in regard to page 31, paragraphs 6.7 and 6.8. And this was in relation to the approach by Heartland for some financial underwriting of an event, presumably. It does talk about two events. I wonder if we were able to name the two events, but I'm aware of the issue surrounding the complete 7-day closure of the A9 off-slip into Pitlochry for a period of 7 months. And I'm supportive of providing assistance, but I wonder if there will be other requests for assistance from other events or businesses as a result of this significant road closure. Thank you.
Go yourself first, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, we, as you say, we have named the organiser of the event, but we've been asked not to
identify the individual ends for commercial purposes. So I'll happy to chat with you later. And at this stage, we have not been approached by any other organisations seeking support. So there's no other organisations come forward at this stage.
I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I do have a chat. Second question from Councillor Lane. Grant.
Thanks. It's on the same page as John's question, and it's just the points above it. It's about authorising the £20,000 for waste removal. That's, well, it's fly tipping basically along at the Northfield site, which found about this morning. I was wondering if we were doing anything proactively. I know that there are now cameras there to find out who's been doing the fly tipping, and we're checking the waste and to see if we can actually identify any of the people from whence the waste has come. £20,000 sounds like quite a few tons of waste being dumped in one of our sites for sale. So I was wondering if there's any of the officers could say, give me the assurance that we are doing everything we can to find out for those responsible before we commit the £20,000 to take this waste away.
Yeah, and as you're aware, I raised the matter this morning at Economy and Infrastructure, and indeed I took a photo last night. I went out to see a huge sign, Raymond Civil, with development land for sale with masses of rubbish strewn about it, and also off to the left, even more stuff, and next to the food and drink units. But I think Fraser, can you answer this? I wasn't quite clear this 20,000, why it was coming this way from the Communities Fund rather than from the CPIP budget, but maybe I'm misunderstanding things. Fraser.
Thank you, Convener. So firstly, just to provide some reassurance that yes, this is a priority area that our fly tipping coordinator and indeed other members of our team are focusing on. There are now 3, I think, CCTV cameras in the location, and since they have been put in place, there have been no further incidents of fly tipping at the site. More generally, throughout 25-26, there were 4 £500 fixed penalty notices that have been issued. 2 of those have already been paid. So we are, taking action on this. The appointment of our new fly tipping coordinator, I think, has been extremely helpful. But as I say, working alongside Hunter's team in community support and enforcement, along with others in Pete's team, also to maintain that sort of visible presence in that particular area. Beyond that, in terms of the funding side of it, to be honest with you, we've had this experience in the past, and given the pressures on the operations budget and the scale of this particular clear-up, we're keen, obviously, that doesn't impact directly on the operations budget. So I think it was considered that obviously the community earmarked reserve is somewhere where we'll have some capacity maybe to deal with this specific issue. As to where maybe any future issues are funded from, that's maybe for a separate discussion. But hopefully that will provide some assurance about what's happening at that particular site, but also our enforcement and sort of coordination on fly tipping more generally.
Thank you.
Grant, do you want to follow up?
No, just to say I think the fly tipping team do a fantastic job, and some other investment keeping Perth and Kinross as an area tidy, and it just shows that in some places and used properly, surveillance cameras can provide a good result.
Could I just follow up, Fraser, to say to you, if we agree on this 20,000 from the Communities Fund, given that it's next to the food and drink units, 4 of the 5 units I think are currently being utilised and others under offer. And it's also development land for sale. So this is commercial property investment portfolio. We've got to look commercial. Is there going to be a rapid response? This 20,000, it will be cleared up rapidly because it really is an eyesore and does not look good.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all teed up for going in and starting to clear up this weekend if approval is given today.
Right, that's reassuring. Good. Right, the next question is Colin Stewart, Councillor Stewart.
Thanks, Convener. It's a question on the Chief Education Officer remuneration. Paragraph 8.8 says that there should be a notional 10% step between head teachers and effectively the Chief Education Officer. But in paragraph 8.9, the increment is £18,000. Now, I don't think that £18,000 can be 10% of our highest paid head teacher's salary, can it? I'm appreciating that there will be some on costs as well, but that would be a lot.
You're absolutely right. It does include on costs. It's about £12,000 the salary, and with 30% on costs, that's what takes up to £17,000, £18,000. Yeah.
I think possibly the final question is from Councillor Duff. It says second question, John.
It's probably just a follow-on to Councillor Stewart's question there. It says in the report, what does it say exactly? It talks about being pay adjusted with a supplement. And I just wondered, is this a pay increase, or is there some other way of adding to the salary that's not a pay increase? And it was just the use of that term that I was a bit uncertain about.
Scott, I think you.
Yeah, thank you. So I do have a response from our colleagues in HR who unfortunately couldn't be with us today. Sorry, just bear with me. So the strategic lead role was were all graded using the external consultant's Hays. We don't have a director's role for education learning, unlike some councils. So they're using a salary supplement to manage the leapfrogging. There's no material change in his role, but it's to compensate for the recent changes to head teachers' pay awards. So it's a supplement rather than a placement on the scale.
Just have a follow-up if that's okay then. Can I just confirm then whether it would contribute to pension entitlement? Thank you.
It does contribute to pension, yeah.
There being no further questions, I'm going to move the report, and I'm more than happy to move this report. This gives you all councillors it's the fourth revenue monitoring report for 25-26 financial year to the end of January, and as was stated earlier, there will be a final monitoring report in June to cover the period to end of March. I think it gives a pretty clear view of the council's overall financial position as we were approaching the year end. I think an important point to stress is, despite ongoing financial pressures facing local government overall, I think the fact it does show a projected underspend of 2.5 million, and also at one and the same time a strengthening of our reserves position. Let's look at the revenue monitoring. I think overall, given the financial challenges we face, also the ever-growing demand for council services, I think we can be pleased at the position that we are in, but not overly complacent. I also very much would point out we have, I'm not sure where we fit in Scotland amongst other local authorities, but we're certainly top quartile, probably top decile in terms of our council tax collection. And that really pays tribute to our finance team and local taxes team. I think it's overall an impressive performance. So I would like to thank the Chief Executive and all officers, not just finance officers, from across the council for contributions to where we are. On reserves, our unearmarked general fund reserves are now projected at around 3.5%. That fits more than comfortably within the agreed 2 to 4% range. So that gives us a cushion going forward, really for unforeseen for circumstances. I think it does demonstrate the council is maintaining resilience, is managing risk responsibly, and also it's avoiding the need for really short-term fixes that simply pass problems into future years. The proposed movements in reserves set out in the report are deliberate, they are controlled, they're transparent, they ensure that funds are applied only where there is a clear purpose and member approval. It also brings forward a series of practical, I think, reserve and budget adjustments, including the treatment of additional funding and the alignment of resources with planned activity in both 25-26 and 26-27. I think we maintain our flexibility, protecting the council's financial stability and support delivery without undermining our overall position. It's above all about strong financial stewardship, maintaining our grip, using reserves properly, and keeping the council in a position to respond to future pressures from a position of strength, not weakness. I'd also point out the workforce management updates set out in section 8. I think that matters. And so overall, I'm more than happy to move recommendations as set out in this report. Can I ask for a seconder?
I'm happy to.
Robert Parrott.
I'm happy to formally second the report. Thank you.
An amendment. Could I ask Councillor Drysdale to move the amendment? And seconded by Councillor McKeown.
Hello. Yes. Thank you, convener. And yes, I've well, I see before I even ask, the proposed amendment is now up on screen, and I'll give colleagues a moment or two just to read that, and then I'll say a few words, or more than a few words actually, about the background to this. Okay, just giving you a little time to read that. So, as will be clear from the some of the questions earlier, tackling antisocial behaviour is and has always been a key priority of this administration, and indeed this council, and based on information received at budget time, it was agreed to accept the Liberal Democrat group proposal to earmark £50,000 more funding than in the 25-26 budget, specifically to support the Visitor Ranger service. This follows substantial seven-figure investment, firstly by the Scottish Government during and immediately after COVID, and then by Perth and Kinross Council in every year since. And yet, we learn from today's report there is a projected overspend of £105,000 for the financial year just ended. As if this financial situation wasn't challenging enough, there is unfortunately a wider, even deeper and serious societal issue that we need to confront, and the Visitor Ranger Service is one part of that, a very important part of the Council's efforts to address it. Last year it was decided to bring the Ranger Service firmly within the larger community support and enforcement team. At the same time increasing the frontline staffing complement and creating opportunities for more flexible deployment of resources, while also installing portaloos at rural tourist hotspots and increasing waste uplift frequency as part of the overall service. As a result of my inquiries over recent weeks, I now have a better and more in-depth understanding of the service as a whole and the challenges being faced by the community support and enforcement team, not just at rural tourist hotspots, but also within our towns and city, where I am disappointed to say antisocial behaviour in many forms, such as drunken misbehaviour, vandalism and graffiti, littering, inconsiderate parking, and much more besides, continues to happen pretty much daily in various known locations. So as I say, the problem to be solved is wider and bigger than the visitor ranger element, albeit how important that is. For example, just last weekend, 3 shop windows were vandalised in Perth, just as the recently approved City Centre Improvement Task Force is getting to work. Add to that the far too frequent incidents of brazen shoplifting, hotspots of drunken and unruly behaviour, etc. And it's a challenging situation that needs tackling head on. That's what we plan to do. I want us to work even more closely with Police Scotland to ensure that combined resources are as closely aligned as they can be. And I am delighted to say that both Superintendent Elaine Logue, Tayside Divisional Commander, and Area Commander Chief Inspector Jamie Allen are very much up for discussions about this too. We will meet as soon as possible to talk about the challenges and solutions in more depth. And I would also wish to extend an invitation to all political group leaders to join in these conversations. Meanwhile, I recognise that increased visibility of our operatives and absolutely of uniformed police officers too, coupled with improved CCTV surveillance and more antisocial behaviour investigators to respond to victim complaints and pursue identification of perpetrators, are all areas that we need to try to support. And that means money, of course. And to be clear, the problems exist in both rural and urban hotspots. We cannot do this as quickly or as comprehensively as we would like, even with the proposed threefold increase, further increase, should I say, in additional funding this year. And we would certainly intend to make this one of the priority areas of future investment of funds raised via a new visitor levy if Council can be persuaded to support this in June. But we need to do, in any event, we need to do what we can now this year with the more limited resources at our disposal. Our proposal is that for the remainder of this financial year, committee agrees to allocate an additional £150,000 towards enhancing the capabilities and increasing the capacity and scope for flexible deployment of the CSET. That's the Community Support and Empowerment Team, which is quite a mouthful, as a whole over the weeks and months ahead, allowing officers discretion as to how these finances are used in pursuit of these objectives I have outlined. Performance will then be carefully analysed in order to help determine resourcing requirements next year and beyond. I have repeatedly stated our strong desire to restore more pride in our communities by improving our environment. We are blessed with rural and lochside landscapes of outstanding natural beauty, and we must ensure they remain the fantastic assets that they are. Meanwhile, we are carrying out a range of quick environmental improvements in Perth this year and hope to roll this out to other towns next year. But if we do not also try to address the scourge of antisocial behaviour, we will not succeed to the extent we would like. I would therefore urge all elected members to support this amendment and signal that, while we may have our political differences, we are united in our desire to make Perth and Kinross an even better place to live than it already is. Can I now ask Councillor McEwen, Convener of Housing and Social Wellbeing, to second this amendment on what would become a key additional project for his committee to oversee as we move forward, and then also invite the movers of the original motion to then accept this amendment into the substantive motion. Thank you.
Tom.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Drysdale. As a rural councillor, I'm often quite appalled at reports in the press and on our local social media of antisocial behaviour, especially in my own ward. From damage to properties, both business and residential, forced entry into out-of-use buildings, damage to parked motor vehicles and misuse of our local beauty spots, the list of ways individuals and small groups can terrorise a community seems without end. Police presented at the Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee in March regarding the development of a new community model for policing, and during the presentation and the subsequent questioning by councillors, it was evident that this presents an opportunity for further and more flexible engagement from Council's community support and empowerment team with the community policing officers, local groups and the public. Discussions with council officers since then has confirmed that further resource is required to fulfil this greater reach of engagement that these changes present and the improvements our community demands on us as a council. My hope is that this deeper engagement by the community team will support prevention and education rather than just enforcement, and will improve opportunities for local groups to provide activities within our communities that support better cohesion and less drive for antisocial behaviour. Only by joint working and collaboration across policing, council, community groups and the public can this be a success, and I therefore support this amendment to provide extra funding so we can ensure the council has the resources to play its part in this important joint working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKeon. As the mover of the original motion, and I think the Deputy Provost would take a very similar view, we'd certainly be willing to incorporate that amendment into the overall motion. However, I think also I do want to hear comments, and first of all is Councillor Leighton Grant.
First and foremost, just to clarify, just to get Andrew to formally, I mustn't presume, are you willing to formally second?
Yes, I'm happily to see this amendment formally incorporated into the motion.
Okay, I was just jumping and ahead too much. Councillor Grant.
Thanks, Convener. I totally support the motion. I think that it was unnecessary. We're meant to be putting forward a united front This should have been addressed 7 weeks ago at the budget, and we're coming back to do it. We had the discussion at the budget. I had the discussion with Deputy Leader of the administration saying we had to put at least 100,000 in. It didn't appear. If we, especially as a rural councillor with Claire McLaren and Ian James as well, we know well what this is like. And I raised at the previous FNR that we were 94,000 overspent, asked why, and it was because we were told the previous year that officers had enough funding to not have any diminution of the service for that funding. That's why we didn't put it in extra last year. This year we knew at budget time that we didn't work. There was not enough funding in the pot. So whilst I really welcome it coming forward now, I think it could have been done back during the budget process. The last thing, and I do welcome it coming forward, so I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea, is that yes, we have areas of antisocial behaviour within Perth. They are small. I don't want anything going out in the press on the back of the statement that Eric made when putting forward this thing to make anybody think that Perth is a lawless place where you can't walk down the street. Perth is a beautiful place. It's a place people should come and visit. And we've got isolated areas and problems like every city, and this is a way of tackling them. But it is not the defining image of Perth or any of the places in Perth and Kinross. And we don't want it portrayed as that. I want it portrayed as, in my economic and development role, the things that we're doing to enhance Perth and bring people in. And we will, using this extra funding, help deal with the small areas antisocial behaviour and also help our shopkeepers, especially the independents, but all of them who are losing vast parts of their income through shoplifting, etc. So I'm supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I call on Councillor Ian James? Ian?
Thanks, convener. I wasn't expecting that because there was a couple of people actually before me. Sorry.
It's Ian. Can you hold a minute, just in order of sequence? It's Councillor Duff, and then Bailey McLaren. Yeah, it's come up wrong on the screen. Councillor Duff, John.
Thank you, convener, and can I thank the Leader of the Council for giving me sight of his planned amendment ahead of this meeting today. I had intended to bring forward my own amendment on visitor ranger funding, but feel that this amendment, with slight tweaking, would also cover the points I wish to make. I would therefore propose a slight variation, which hopefully, well, members will have in their chat. Sorry, it won't be on the screen, but members will have in their chat, and the changes are the ones highlighted in red. So to recruit additional staff resource with a particular emphasis on additional visitor rangers, and then further down in related roles to try to increase community engagement and reassurance, deter or intervene, etc. So these two additional amendments, and I hope that, I'm not sure if it's Councillor Drysdale or Councillor Donaldson that I'm now asking for permission to incorporate into the motion, but perhaps we can deal with that when the time comes. I appreciate that the amendment by Councillor Drysdale takes a wider view of the visitor management issue and antisocial behaviour and a number of other considerations. But if you'll forgive me, I'll find my comments at the moment are more focused on the value and benefit of visitor rangers in particular. As members are aware, visitor numbers continue to place increasing pressure on many of our beauty spots and popular tourist locations across Perth and Kinross. Managing that pressure has become a significant issue for our rural communities, particularly during the visitor season, when the impact on local amenity, infrastructure and residents is most acute. That was why we had a significant additional funding of £182,000 for visitor rangers in our budget in March. I'm pleased that this issue is being recognised belatedly today. Visitor rangers provide a dedicated, visible and practical presence that helps manage these pressures. They support responsible access by engaging directly with visitors and residents, offering guidance and resolving issues on the ground. Crucially, they can often intervene early before problems escalate into antisocial behaviour, damage to property or the environment, or strained relationships within our rural communities. I welcome the movement on this issue since we discussed this at the budget in March. And finally, can I just return to the subject of the paper and thank Mr. Walker and his team for his usual professional update on our revenue budget. Unfortunately, some of that information has possibly been lost a bit in terms of the focus on the visitor rangers. But we appreciate the detail that is in the revenue budget paper and the manner in which our finances are continue to be looked after by our finance team. Thank you.
I'm next going to move to Baillie McLaren, but before I do so, I think Councillor Drysdale wants to make some comments on your revisions to his amendment, which we've accepted, obviously.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank Microphone again. Thank you, Convener. And yeah, just to briefly comment in response to Councillor Duff, I would be more than happy to incorporate the tweaked wording that he has suggested. Just pointing out in particular that I'm concerned that the emphasis on additional visitor rangers would be particular for the summer season. And just to be clear on that point, but I'm absolutely supportive. And if I may, just while I have the microphone, briefly to respond to Councillor Lane's comments, and I completely agree that the picture painted, I did specifically say in my comments that this antisocial behaviour occurs at certain known locations, and it's absolutely not a widespread problem throughout all our towns and cities. He's quite right.
Could I just say, as the mover of the amended motion, substantive motion, I'm more than happy to accept the revised wording from Councillor Duff, and I think it helps to, it complements and supplements the original motion. And I trust my seconder is in agreement.
Yes, I'm happy to.
Okay, we now move on to Baillie McLaren. Claire.
Thank you, Convener. So I also, enthusiastically support this amendment brought forward by Councillor Leader Drysdale and Councillor McEwen. It is important, and we particularly do have issues within my own council ward, as Councillor Lane pointed out. However, if we are to make meaningful progress in this financial year on a broader scale, bearing in mind the breadth of the community enforcement team remit, I would ask the movers of the amendment to increase the amount to 200,000, which on top of the 50,000 that sat within the budget, that would equal 250,000. As we've stated, as we all know, there's persistent issues in areas. Before I came to the committee this morning, I received a complaint about antisocial behaviour on a psychopath. So this is growing, and we do want to get a message out to those residents within communities that do feel that they're dealing with issues, that we are supportive of them, and we do want to see an improvement. So I would ask if the movers would consider that.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to ask the mover of the amendment if he's willing to accept that proposal. And the seconder. Okay.
I second the proposal.
Okay. Right.
Thank you, convener. Yeah, the question of the amount of funding here is important that we reach an agreement here, and I very much value if we are able to achieve a cross-party consensus on this, and I would like to have a brief recess, if I may, just to briefly consult with the Chief Financial Officer to my side here, rather than just respond, but I can do that very quickly. Thank you.
Right, I'm willing to take a recess. I think we want to just get this sorted out. I see Councillor Link has a point of clarification. Grant.
Yes, I need clarity. The point of clarity I'm looking for now, we're at £250,000 extra funding for this of council players' money. I don't see any measurement, how we're measuring the success or non-success. I don't see any matrix or KPIs or anything, and we're just bidding this up and bidding it up. Can somebody give me how we can judge how successful this £250,000 extra is put into it? Because that's what we'd like to know from officers, how we're going to judge this when we look at this at the budget next year.
Okay, my thoughts are we have a thorough report on the matter to the next meeting of Finance and Resources. But just to, can I, another point of clarification is from the Provost, Sandra, and then we will have a recess.
Thanks, and perhaps this point of clarification can be addressed by the Leader of the Council after the recess. I would like a bit of clarity on what the money is actually going to be spent on. I'm not entirely clear what is being proposed here. There is mention of visitor rangers, there is mention of the wider community enforcement and support team. It is not clear on how this money is going to be spent, which links very much to Councillor Ling's point about how we're going to measure it. And you know, the visitor rangers were performing a very distinct function where they are out over the summer period when there is lots of additional visitors around trying to reduce antisocial behaviour before it begins. That is quite different potentially from some of the other work that is being suggested in terms of the city centre shoplifting, etc. So I'd like a bit of clarity on what the money is actually going to be spent on, whether it's £200,000, £250,000, whatever it is. I'd like a bit of clarity on what we're actually going to spend that money on, and that links to Councillor Ling's point about how it's going to be measured.
Okay, thanks. All right, we're going to go into recess. It's 15:12. I propose, if possible, we recommence at between 15:20 and 15:25. I'm not quite sure how long discussions will take, but let's get this sorted out, okay? Okay, regrets that recess took a bit longer than anticipated, but the council leader may want to make some comment, and I will too, but on you go.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you, convener. Can everybody hear me with this microphone again? Yep, good. Thank you. So, following the discussions that we've had with officers, I would first of all ask that Hunter Hope come in and explain what current metrics and what current monitoring takes place, and how he would intend to use the funding as presented in the original amendment. And then I would also ask Baillie McLaren to comment in terms of her proposed amendment to my amendment. But whilst I have the microphone, it remains the case that the wording proposed by Councillor Duff is absolutely accepted.
Basically, what we are stating at the moment is the substantive motion to accept the report and in favour of the report as amended by the amendment from Councillor Drysdale and Councillor McEwan, with the additional two aspects from the Conservatives from John Duff, which we accept, and that is what we're looking at, and that is what we will proceed to. But I think, Hunter Hope, you're going to make some comments.
Thanks, Convener. I was asked to speak to what metrics we could use to gauge the success of this initiative, and also to provide some detail on what we might spend the funding on. So I'll start with the last one, what we might spend the funding on. This year, from the 50,000. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So in terms of what we would spend the money on, at the moment we have £50,000 in the pot, which is intended to be spent on one visitor ranger for the seasonal period, porta cabins, signage and transport. That's what's been earmarked for. The activity obviously is supplemented by the work of your community safety and enforcement team, who will be at hotspots, looking out for the parking arrangements that people have when they come to the hotspots. So they'll be stopping people parking in clearways, and in the course of doing that, they'll be making people aware of what our expectations of their behaviour is. And our leadership team will be meeting with local communities to maintain and sustain relationships with local communities, and to help local communities to get involved in the response to any challenging behaviour. So that's what's on the table at the moment. A visitor ranger for the seasonal period costs £25,000. So, and then the Portaloos cost £25,000. So a little bit of mental maths tells me that with the sort of funding that's been mentioned in the motion, we would be in a position to employ 6 people over the summer period to do the meeting and greeting with visitors. Also, more importantly, to work with local communities to do the clear up of the rubbish that people leave behind. And that's the big concern that communities have, to be honest, and that's what they've told us. So that comes to £175,000. The remaining money would be in transport for those 3 teams of 2 people, and signage, and potentially, as mentioned in the motion, use of technology to enhance our response to the challenges. That might be CCTV, it might be other things. I know that many of you will think, well, what about the period out with the summertime? And I can share that we've done some great work with other parts of the council to improve our capacity across the year, particular surge capacity, if we have particularly egregious problems. So we have a willingness on the part of caretakers, handy people in the housing department to help out. We have a commitment from Nigel Taylor's team at Friarton, who do the street sweeping, to help out as and when they can. And also we have a commitment from Roddy Ross's unpaid work team to get involved in responding to these challenges. So it's not a one size fits all. We're trying to develop a kind of task force approach to this problem, because I think that's what it needs. In terms of metrics, we can obviously record by our beat sheets how many times and how often our officers are on patrol in particular areas. So that gives us a kind of hard metric of the number of hours that we devote to the service. But more importantly, I think we will speak to local communities and ask them how satisfied they are with the response that we've given. Not only the response on the ground, but the engagement we have with them at their community meetings, whether it's a preservation or conservation group or whatever. We'll ask them how we're performing in that regard. And finally, we'll look to other councils that are experiencing similar challenges and look to what sort of metrics they might have and learn from that. So I hope that answers the question, Convener.
Okay, thanks. Right. I think Councillor Lane, you've got a question for Hunter Hope.
Thanks for that. And that was really useful. And I understand that we do get matrix. We get reports of what the visitor rangers are doing, and obviously the boots on the ground make the difference. And a lot of their time is you can't measure it unless you're measuring how many times you speak to people. It's more about the secondary part that I don't understand. I thought that the original amendment was talking about having other squads on the streets of Perth as well, or in other towns in the community side. But what you were talking about was just visitor rangers, extra visitor rangers. So what is coming? Where is the second part of it, which I took to be patrols in Perth, etc. And I was more wanting to know what the matrix were at the moment for our community patroller. I can't remember, sorry, the definition of what they're called. In Perth, what the matrix for they are, how many incidents do they report to the police that they want assistance with, that sort of thing. Not the visitor ranger stuff, because I fully understand how important they are out in like Clooney Loch and the other lochs and areas mentioned. It was more the town side, but what I've just heard, it doesn't seem to have any funding left over for the antisocial behaviour part in Perth.
Hunter Hope.
If I may, Convener, if I can explain that my amendment, and I think I was fairly clear on this, that I see this as a wider issue than visitor rangers. Visitor rangers is a very important part of it, especially in the summer season, as I said earlier to Councillor Duff. And I think the main focus and the immediate focus needs to be on the rural landscapes as we approach the summer season. But what I wanted to achieve with this amendment is to give officers the flexibility to decide exactly what is the best use of the sum of money that may be agreed by this committee, to make in-year adjustments. You've got to appreciate where we are, and the point Councillor Lane made earlier. This is already the end of April. And by the time staff are deployed, we're further into the year. So I'm just looking for progress to be made on all of the issues that I set out in my amendment, and leaving it to a degree to the discretion of senior officers as to how that is deployed.
And that has to be reported back to the Housing and Wellbeing Committee and monitored and assessed by them. I'm going to take, there's a point of clarification, Councillor Ian James. Ian?
Thanks, Convener. I'm just completely confused now. We've sort of gone from the agenda. I don't know whether we're talking about the motion, the amendment, the amended amendment, or what, because everybody's having a chat about everything. We're talking about KPIs and everything else. It'd be just nice to know what we're actually talking about. This could have just been added to the original paper. This is anyway, I'm confused. Where are we, please, Convener? Thank you.
Where we are is a motion to move the revenue monitoring paper as amended by Councillor Drysdale and Councillor McEwen, but with some rewording from Councillor John Duff in respect of the with a particular emphasis on additional visitor ranges and also try to increase community engagement and reassurance. My understanding at this moment is it will be on the amendment additional in-year non-recurring funding of 150,000, and it's non-recurring, making a total of 200,000 additional funding for 26-27. And that is where we are, and that's what we have to agree.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, with the recess meetings, the various people put forward various things, but hopefully we're going to get clarity out of this at the end of the day. Right, the next one is Councillor Rebick. Yeah, and he has a question. John.
It's not a question, Convener. Thank you. It's just a little comment. I think just to add to the lots of conversation that we've had, I think what I take from it, and I thank Hunter for his earlier answer. I think what I take from it is that the consolidation of the teams gives us a pretty large capacity here. 48 people, I think Hunter told me, that are now able to do the functions of traffic wardens, the functions of visitor rangers, the functions of community wardens. And I think that's an important point to make, that we have consolidated all these teams for flexibility. It could be, for example, in July that a lot of these men and women on the ground are doing the function of a visitor ranger. They may not need to do that quite so much in November. And I think it's important to note. Furthermore, I have complete confidence in our team here. I have complete confidence in the service, whether it's senior management or whether it's the men and women on the ground, that they will use the large amount of already existing funding, plus anything that we agree here today at committee. I have complete confidence that they will use this resource to the benefit of the people of Perth and Kinross. I absolutely believe that. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take a point of clarification from Bailey Ahern, and also I'll come back to Councillor James for he wishes to make a comment, and then I will come to Caroline, Councillor Shires.
Thank you very much. When you broke up for recess, you had another amendment on the table, which I think caused the confusion and put you out into recess, yet you've come back in and not mentioned it once. So where do we stand with that? Is that amendment still on the table? Is it included? Has it been discounted?
Well,
thank you, Convener. Yes, I am happy to withdraw my amendment. Post the discussion that we had in recess, there's a fuller understanding of the issues and how an approach is going to be made. So I'm satisfied with the amount that's been suggested in Council Leader's amendment. That will satisfy it.
Right, 150, 200,000. Right, thanks, Claire. So that specific amendment does no longer hold. So it's as I mentioned about 5-10 minutes ago. Right, what? Point of order, Councillor Stewart.
Just to clarify that the seconder of the 15th Amendment is also happy to.
Happy, yeah.
Yes, happy.
Been remiss on that front this afternoon. Right, where are we? Because there's so many points of clarification, points of order, you name it. Yeah, Councillor Lane.
This is quite a simple one, and yeah, I'm still happy to go with it, but I think we have to challenge when we're spending it, it's going to be up to $250,000, and so I think we'll have to take the time to do that, and I think we've thrashed about and got a little bit clear. My point of clarity is a lot of the work that's going to be done in the city centre, and that falls under the remit of environment and infrastructure. And if not, we keep talking about housing and communities. I think we're spending 200,000 to upgrade, first of all, Perth and then other areas in the town. I think a lot of this comes under the remit of the economy and infrastructure. So the
I'm going to move. Okay, I hear what you say. I think that's something will have to be discussed later on. I think what's happening here will have to certainly be considered in depth by Housing and Social Wellbeing Committee, and that's absolutely clear. And we need to know exactly how we account for the funds. Right, I'm going to go to Councillor Ian James, and I overlooked him earlier, and he wants to make a comment. Councillor James.
Thanks, convener. Appreciate that. And yes, in the chaos, it has been bits have been missed and everything else. Getting back to the paper with the amendment as it stands, I think it's worth revisiting the whole paper and saying thanks to Scott Walker for starters. It's good to know that council finances are actually in safe hands. With specifically with the visitor ranger or the visitor ranger motion, I've been involved heavily on a personal level, convener, in a particular hotspot within Perth and Kinross, and I know the value of visitor rangers, and which is why we did ask for it in our budget. The locals actually rely on our visitor rangers mainly for a sense of safety and community. The rangers that we have, and thanks to Frank Campbell and his team, they put up with an awful lot, but provide a massive service to our residents. And I think whilst we tend to be as an authority quite urban centric, as in there's an awful lot happening around the city, we tend to forget our rural areas, and it's the rural areas in particular that will suffer without visitor rangers. So I welcome this additional funding to allow Hunter, Frank and the team to actually provide the service, which I've got to say it as well, I know it's mentioned earlier, but it was the Provost Sander who actually brought this to a budget meeting a while back, and I've got to say it was a stroke of genius. Thanks, Sander. But you know, from an area that actually we had in my particular local area, we've had a stabbing, we've had a sexual assault, and those people were living in fear and were worried this year, very worried this year, that they weren't going to get the service that they had previously. So I know that this will go some way to alleviating a lot of their fears, and I thank you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Councillor Shires, and we're nearly there, but Caroline?
I think the Provost actually was before me, convener, with a comment, or did I get it wrong, Xander?
No, I've got the Provost is after you.
Okay. Thank you very much for all of this. I very much welcome the additional funding. The Blairgowrie Glens ward sits on the edge of the Cairngorm National Park, and I know that there has been concern about the implementation of their no fires bylaw and the fact that that might push issues further down into parts of Blairgowrie Glens that sit around the national park boundary. I think it's unfortunate that we've kind of got a bit mixed up in the very specific challenges of urban versus rural, and the specific role of the visitor rangers that they play, and so I look forward to the rollout of the service as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. And I think the last person for comment is Provost McDade. Xander.
Thanks, convener, and thank you, Councillor James, for your kind comments towards me earlier. I think just a few points, since and also I think worth starting with thanks to Mr. Walker for all of his and his team's work on the rest of the paper, which is not a visitor management paper, but actually is the Revenue Budget Monitoring Report. So just worth saying that up front. But moving on to perhaps my pet favourite topic of visitor management, having been involved with it for a long time, both in the Cairngorm National Park and here in Perth and Kinross, having introduced the original pilot scheme. I think it's worth recognising that visitor rangers have a quite specific purpose, which is to engage in a positive way with visitors about preventing certain behaviours from happening, preventing that antisocial behaviour that Councillor James mentioned earlier and others have mentioned, that there are specific risks that we are trying to alleviate, and also to try and address what is essentially a shortage in other public services. There is not enough police, etc., to provide support for all of these areas, and therefore we are filling a gap that is not being serviced by others. Slightly unfortunate, perhaps, that Baillie McLaren withdrew her second or third amendment, whichever it was, because I put in the recess 240,000 into the Bank of England's inflation calculator, and 240,000 in March of 2021 is now worth about £302,000 now. So she was probably roughly on the money, actually, for what the service value is if we were to keep it up with inflation. And I think it's worth reflecting that back when we introduced the service in March of 2021, there was about 7 or 8 visitor rangers and the associated vehicle and infrastructure. There was also a visitor management coordinator at that point as well, and there was wider money that was used towards to support the toilets and other provisions. So we have reduced quite significantly the direct impact money that was going into that, and they were already supported at that point from the beginning by our parking and enforcement services, who were enforcing the clearaways and were providing wider support. So it is not new that they have been involved, but the level of support and financial support that is going into that area and that service has reduced. And I think that's quite important to recognise. There are some quite specific issues, and Councillor Shires reached one of those when she was talking about the new Cairngorms National Park fire bylaw, and that has been introduced to try and reduce the risk of wildfire. But these are the sorts of issues that are mitigated by having visitor rangers. They can address these early on before they become massive incidents that cause huge amounts of devastation. So I think I just wanted to pick up that very specific point of these individuals were doing a very specific role. It is now quite late in the season already to be recruiting these. Normally you'd want them in place in March, so we are already running behind the clock on this, as it were. So I'm pleased that this is being addressed now, but I think it's worth recognising these issues as we go forward into next financial year, to make sure that they are addressed long term, and that we don't just keep piling pressures onto services without expecting them to have the resource that they require to support it.
Okay, thank you. Right, that's comments completed. I'm now going to ask this committee, ultimately, we've got there, to approve the revenue report, but as amended by the motion put forward by Councillor Drysdale and by Councillor McKeown, and that is in particular non-recurring funding of 150,000 per annum. It's non-recurring, and an additional giving an additional 200,000 added to the 50,000 that was in the budget for 26-27, and the amended motion will also include the words that are put forward by Councillor John Duff. So can we agree the report? Great. And obviously there's a matter, it will go to Housing Social Wellbeing Committee, and I think they have to look at matters and should in a lot more depth, and hear from Hunter Hope and his team. Right, I'm going to move, because we did have a break, fairly lengthy break there for recess. So I'm going to move now on to the capital budget report, and can I ask Scott once again to introduce this. Scott.
Okay, thank you, convener. This report provides the committee with the latest monitoring position on the council's capital programme. It covers the 6-year composite capital budget from 25-26 to 30-31 and the 5-year housing investment programme to 29-30. This is the 4th monitoring report in the current cycle and reflects the position to the 28th of February. The key thing I'd like to emphasise is that the overall scale of the capital programme is not changing in any material way. The composite programme now stands at £573.4 million, an increase of just £360,000 since the position agreed by Council in March. What members are seeing in this report is the continued refinement of delivery plans to ensure that budgets and borrowing align and with when projects will be realistically delivered. If I focus firstly on the current year, the material movements in 25-26 are concentrated in a small number of service areas. In environment and infrastructure, the rephasing reflects practical delivery issues, particularly the impact of winter weather on flooding and bridge works, and the need to align transport and active traffic projects with contractor availability and construction sequencing. In housing and communities, several in-year movements reflect planning, consultation and procurement timetables rather than any change in delivery. And within property services, the scale of rephasing is a consequence of the size and complexity of the council estate, with works deliberately aligned to school holidays, operational buildings, and the availability of specialist contractors. Across all of these areas, services have actively revisited delivery plans and challenged assumptions. Budgets have only remained in year where officers have a high degree of certainty that spend will genuinely occur before the end of March. Where that does not exist, spend has been moved to the year in which delivery is now expected. The impact of this approach is that the projected net outturn for the composite programme in 25-26 has reduced to £94.5 million, with around 75% of that spend already incurred by the end of February. Crucially, this has reduced the estimated borrowing requirement for the current year by £15.6 million compared to the position approved in March. That is a positive adjustment in cash flow terms and helps manage short-term borrowing pressures without reducing the scale or ambition of the capital programme. Turning to the housing investment programmes, members will see a different but related pattern. The total 5-year programme has increased following decisions already approved by committees and councils, particularly in relation to the Council House buyback programme and future SHQS investments. These changes reflect strategic choices about how we respond to housing need and quality standards rather than cost pressures emerging during the year. At the same time, the monitoring position shows a significant reprofiling of expenditure within 25-26. A number of housing projects have moved into later years to reflect realistic delivery timescales, including procurement lead-in, sequencing of works in occupied homes, and alignment with contractor capacity. As a result, the borrowing requirement for the housing investment programme in the current year has reduced by £12.3 million, even though the overall programme has increased over the 5-year period. This does not represent a slowdown in delivery or a loss of momentum in the housing programme. Delivery responsibility remains on track, and investment continues to be targeted at priority areas, including new build, buybacks, energy efficiency, and property condition. The rephasing simply ensures that borrowing is taken when expenditure will actually incur in line with prudent financial management. Overall, the position before committee today demonstrates discipline, control, and improved certainty across both the composite capital programme and the housing investment programme. It reduces short-term financial risk, improves transparency over delivery, and provides a stronger base for managing future years within an increasingly challenging financial environment. The recommendations therefore ask the committee to note the monitoring position and to approve the proposed adjustments to both the capital programmes as set out in the report and appendices. I'd like to thank colleagues involved in the preparation and delivery of these projects and programmes. Colleagues and I are happy to take questions. Thank you.
Scott, thank you. First question is Bailey Ahern. Chris.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Scott, for the paper. My question is on the Bell Sports Centre redevelopment. During a recent visit, we were showing some work that I don't think had been anticipated on the main struts. Do you know, was that discovered before the budget was put in, or are we going to have to find more money to carry out those repairs?
John Beveridge.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Ahern. No, there was a sum of £10 million put in for the works at Bell Sports Centre, but at that time it was very much looking at what works would be required. So the investigations and the surveys were underway at that time. So the actual known works have not been evidenced at this stage. That's part of the works which are underway at the moment. So we feel anticipated there would be stuff like what you're identified. So we're fully expecting to find that and other items that will need to be rectified as part of the works.
Thank you.
Okay, right. Councillor Duff, John.
Thank you. My question's on page 62 at the table there at 5.5.3. There's a couple of entries there in relation to Perth Grammar School and Perth Academy refurbishments totaling £350,000. I remember some time back that we were talking about a review of secondary education in Perth City and the plans for Perth Academy and the grammar going forward. And I wonder if there's any update on where that might be. Thank you.
David McCloskey isn't here. Caroline.
Okay, thank you. So at this stage, there is no definitive update on the review of the secondary education in Perth City. David and his team are still data and evidence gathering and is ongoing to inform any future options exercise. And there are definitively no current plans to change provision in Perth City Secondary at this time.
Councillor Lane Grant.
Thanks, Convener. Scott, being parochial for a change, Northwest Primary that's scheduled to be sort of 26, 27, 27, 28, is that Bertha Park?
I was looking at John there. I think I can answer that one. Yes.
All I wanted to know, so I'm really happy that I did speak to Convener, and I'm sure he said it, but I didn't identify it as Northwest until we start calling it Bertha Park Primary now. That would be good to do that. Cheers.
Can I comment, Convener?
Yeah.
Thank you. I think my understanding as Lennon Families Convener is that the new primary school will be situated in Bertha Park. Whether it's actually called Bertha Park Primary, I don't know, but it is the one which I think we would informally refer to as Bertha Park Primary, because that's where it will be situated. But that's what it refers to.
Thanks, John, because there is a interest now because of the number of children who are living in the Bertha Park area. So that's really good news for the local residents. Thanks.
Okay, John, thanks for that contribution. I can't see any further questions, so I'm now going to move the report. Okay. Obviously it's again the fourth report, monitoring report for the year on the capital budget, and it's not just the composite capital budget, but also the housing investment programme. And I think it's a positive. It's progress report on how we deliver investments across Perth and Kinross. I think what this report demonstrates very clearly is that despite a challenging national financial context, projects are being taken forward, risks are being actively managed, and investment is being delivered in a disciplined and responsible manner. Across the capital programme, we're seeing real progress on the ground, from flood protection schemes and bridge refurbishments through to improvements in our transport infrastructure, investment in schools, and significant work on our property and community assets. And I think that's well reflected in Appendix 4 of the report. I think it's one of the most useful aspects of the capital report. And on one page, it gives you a synopsis, a kind of appraisal of basically what the various projects are about and what they're and how they're progressing. And I think it's a very helpful one-page document. Above all, the figures that we give, they're not abstract. They are projects that improve safety, support economic activity, and strengthen communities across the region. I think it's also reassuring that this monitoring position shows the Council, in actual fact, reducing its borrowing requirement this year. I think that reflects good financial stewardship and realistic profiling of spend, while still maintaining momentum on priority projects. I think that balance between ambition and affordability is exactly what our citizens expect from us. On housing, I think again the council's clear commitment shows towards investing in homes, including the expansion of the buyback programme and future developments, helping tackle housing need whilst keeping spending under close control. Members will also note that many of the movements in this report are about rephasing to ensure projects are delivered properly, not cuts or cancellations. And I think that's indeed, if you look at the figures in depth, quite an important element. I think officers are focusing on quality, deliverability, and value for money, and it's what we in this committee should expect. Overall, I think the report again provides assurance that the Council's capital investment programme is being delivered, being monitored robustly and being adapted sensibly so that projects move from planning into delivery. And so, along with thanking Council officers and the finance team, I'm more than happy to move the recommendations at section 2 of the report. And I would now just ask if there's any comments. And I would ask for Councillor Drysdale to second.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'm more than happy to second, and in so doing, I would, as I didn't have the opportunity at the stage of the revenue report, can I thank, as usual, Scott Walker, Chief Finance Officer, and in connection with this paper, John Jennings and James Salisbury, Senior Accountants, for their fantastic work in overseeing and monitoring the capital budget on behalf of the Council. So I'm happy to second.
Thanks. Do we have any comments? There being none, can we agree the report? Good. Excellent. Right. We now move on to the Treasury report. And again, I would ask Scott to introduce the report, but I know John Jennings is probably and is online. Okay, Scott.
Thank you, convener. This report sets out Treasury activity for the 6-month period from October through to the end of March. Section 3 of the report provides the committee with wider commentary on the economy and some of the challenges being experienced. Section 4 provides elected members with a summary of the Treasury activity undertaken in what has been a very busy 6 months. I don't intend to repeat the report line by line, but I do want to focus on paragraphs 4.4 to 4.13, because they set out how we have actively managed borrowing, risk and cost during what has been a highly volatile period in financial markets, and importantly, the financial benefits that have flowed to the Council from those decisions. By way of context, this period saw an initial reduction in the bank base rate, followed by significant volatility in PWLB rates, particularly in March, driven in part by geopolitical events. In that kind of environment, Treasury management is about judgment and timing. The first area I want to highlight is the early repayment of PWLB debt. Over the period, we undertook the premature repayment of 11 fixed maturity PWLB loans, totaling £55.5 million. These were long-dated loans, many with 30 years or more left to run. And the reason for acting early was straightforward. Market movements created clear financial value for the Council. In November, following a rise in longer-term interest rates, 6 loans totaling £28 million were repaid. Because those loans were priced below prevailing PWLB rates at the time, the Council received a cash discount of £2.3 million, and we expect to save a further £340,000 in interest over the next 8 years, with costs broadly neutral thereafter. In February, after a spike in rates, we structured a second package of early repayments. This was deliberately designed to enable repayment of a historic £7.5 million loan at 7.5%, which had remained on our balance sheet for many years. By packaging that loan with others, we avoided the premium that would otherwise have applied and instead secured a net discount, along with ongoing annual interest savings. A final early repayment in March generated an additional £670,000 discount, which helped offset the wider increase in borrowing costs that emerged at that time. Across these transactions, the key point is that we converted market volatility into tangible financial benefit in the form of discounts received, future interest savings, and a reduced exposure to legacy high-interest debt. It's important to acknowledge, and I want to be clear about this, that early repayment does increase the annual borrowing requirement in the short term. But that was a conscious decision taken because the overall cost and risk position of the Council was improved as a result. The second major financial benefit I want to highlight is around the timing of our new borrowing. Just 2 days before the escalation of events in the Middle East, we took the decision to undertake £45 million of new borrowing, fixing rates at around 4.45%. The report is very clear on the impact of that decision. Had we waited until the borrowing was absolutely necessary, market movements indicate that the Council would have faced around £400,000 per year of additional interest costs over the next couple of years. So that decision avoided a material cost pressure, and at the same time it strengthened our short-term investment position and ensured that we continue to support the capital programme without disruption. Looking forward, based on current projections, we do not expect to begin borrowing for 26-27 until around July or August. So those decisions have provided both immediate and a medium-term benefit. Turning briefly to the year-end position, as a result of all borrowing and repayment activity, total long-term debt stood at just over £807 million at the 31st of March, at an average interest rate of around 3%. We also continue to make prudent use of short-term market borrowing to manage daily cash flow and to defer longer-term borrowing decisions when PWLB rates were unattractive. Again, a decision aimed at controlling costs. In parallel, paragraph 4.12 and 4.13 confirm appropriate stewardship of common good, charitable and third-party funds, with balances and interest rates moving in line with expectations, and that all short-term cash balances were invested strictly in accordance with the approved investment strategy, using low-risk, high-liquid instruments. Finally, I just want to provide the committee with assurance on our governance and compliance. For this period, there were no breaches of the Council's Treasury Management Policy Statement or Treasury Management Practices. All borrowing and investment activity complied with the SITFA Treasury Management Code, and the Council remained within all approved prudential indicator limits, including those relating to borrowing, loan charges and capital financing. Those limits are monitored continuously, and while indicators understandably show an upward trend, reflecting the scale of the capital programme, they remain within approved parameters under active review. To close, the overall message from this report is one of an active, disciplined Treasury management, delivering real financial benefit, avoiding future costs, managing risk appropriately, and doing so entirely within the agreed governance and compliance framework. The recommendation today is that the committee notes the report, and we're happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Scott. And I think the stress is it's active Treasury management, and the graph that was circulated of the certainty interest rates, I think is important, and you can see the position and how various term monies have moved over the last year. And I think that's an important element to consider. Now, can I just ask, are there any questions? Councillor Lane. Grant?
You couldn't sorry, thanks, convener. You couldn't let so much work pass unmentioned and not have a question for it. My question's really about the global volatility that we're facing just now, and how we as a local authority, because of interest rates and the cost of fuel, etc., for all the services we provide, obviously not been looked at in advance of the budget for this year. So we'll probably see the effects of that. Will we see the effects of that coming through in the revenue budget moving on? But really, about this is I believe that we seem to be relying more heavily now on short-term borrowing rather than longer-term borrowing. And I would have thought that short-term borrowing in this climate may be part of a risk. If you could just, I know you mentioned it, but if you could explain it to somebody who's clueless like I am, in terms I would understand. Thanks.
Okay, well, maybe just touch there, I think, on the fuel first, just to allay any fears. We've got 26, 27 energy and gas pretty much secured. We don't anticipate any price pressures for 26, 27.
It was diesel and petrol for the vehicles rather than, because I know that sensible buying by our teams have got pre-bought the energy, but it was more the automated fuels.
Okay, yeah, and in terms of fuel, diesel, etc., we're setting up internal working groups because it's not only council that's impacted by this, it's many of our providers, our suppliers, our taxi drivers, our buses. So Hunter Hope, who was in the room earlier on, has set up a working group to look at this, how we support these individuals, these companies, over what is hopefully a short-term issue, but we'll see. So any issues of that will come back in future revenue monitor reports.
And the other thing, a bit like Trigger, it doesn't affect me. I only put £40 in every time. So, but the question that I was asked was about the short-term and long-term interest rates.
So I assume you're going to the garage a bit more often than you were. But yeah, I mean, sorry, just to go back to the question, yeah, we are reducing long-term debt, yes, and we are increasing short-term debt, yes. It may increase our exposure to interest rates. But we think the risk is on the downside. We do expect rates to fall over the short term once we get over this particular hump. And the worst case scenario is that because of the premiums that we have generated, the savings we've generated in the last few months, that will mitigate against some of those pressures. Our strategy over the last couple of years, has been to borrow short because we're just waiting for the sweet spot in terms of when we go long again. So that's our strategy, and we will continue to do that.
Any further questions? Bailey Ahern, Chris.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I found this a really interesting report. I think there's a little bit of crystal ball gazing going on in some of the bits there in terms of getting in 2 days before the prices go up. But my question is on the improved investment counterpart list. And I still see there's a number of US banks on there under the 25% investment total or under 10 million. Is there still a risk in terms of the US banks or US dollar investments, given the volatility of the dollar at the moment across the world, the selling off of US dollar?
So we work closely with our Treasury advisors about who we should be dealing with. Those organisations are still okay as far as we're concerned. I mean, John Jennings, you deal with Link on a much more regular basis. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just to confirm that these are all highly rated banks. There's no immediate threat to their credit ratings, but also if we were to do investments with them, they'd be through UK subsidiary branches, and all investments would be in sterling, so it wouldn't be impacted by any exchange rate movements or impact on the dollar.
Any more questions? Right, I'm going to move to the report. I'm certainly more than happy to move this Treasury Activity and Compliance Report, and it covers the 6 months until the end of March 2026 this year. And I'm very glad it is so recent, because the fact it does cover to the 31st of March also covers the first month of the Gulf conflict and the uncertainties that has created as well. It's an assurance report, but it's also, I think, very much strong illustration of really good financial stewardship in what's been an especially volatile economic environment, and also geopolitical stresses. But I think over the period covered, interest rates remained uncertain, market conditions shifted rapidly, and we saw renewed volatility linked to wider geopolitical events. Against that backdrop, I believe the Council has continued to manage both borrowing and investment activity in, once again, a disciplined and a professional manner. I very much myself want to place on record my thanks to Scott as Chief Finance Officer and to the wider Finance and Treasury team, and in particular John Jennings, whom you heard from just a moment ago, for the proactive approach they've evidenced throughout this report. Decisions around the timing of borrowing, the early repayment and restructuring of PWLB debt, and the careful balancing of short-term liquidity against longer-term costs have delivered tangible financial benefits for the Council. Acting ahead of adverse market movements, as we mentioned a minute ago, has protected the revenue position and supported the continued delivery of the capital programme, whilst remaining fully compliant with our approved Treasury management and prudential indicators, and that's one of the appendices to this report on the prudential indicators. It's also reassuring for the committee to note that there have been no compliance breaches during the period and that Treasury activity has remained firmly aligned with the investment strategy approved by Council. I think the report gives clear assurance that risks are being actively managed, cash flow remains robust, and governance arrangements are working as intended. I think it's a solid report. It demonstrates good professional judgment, and judgment is one of the key factors involved here in our Treasury function, and really effective management on behalf of the Council. Hence, formally, I would like to move that the committee notes the contents of this report. And could I ask Councillor Drysdale to second?
I second the report.
Comments? We do, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Convener. Just to echo a lot of the comments that you've made there, I think if you read the report closely, and I know many members of the public probably don't have time to look into in any depth, but I think it shows the not just the Treasury activity, if you like, but the proactivity that goes on with our finance team in terms of trying to find ways to restructure, reprofile our debts and loans and things like that to make sure that the costs to the taxpayer are kept down. And we often see plenty of comment in the media about governments and councils that overspend taxpayers' money, but very few pats on the back when we take measures that try to save the taxpayers' money. So I think it's worth highlighting here openly to the media that are listening, if you like, that we have a finance team in Perth and Kinross Council that does everything possible to try and keep the cost of money and borrowing and spending down as much as possible. And for that, we're very grateful to Scott Walker and the finance team for all the work that they do in this regard. Thank you.
Thanks for that, John. And can I also ask Deputy Provost Andrew Parrott? Andrew, you want to make some comments?
Thank you very much. Councillor John Duff has really stolen my sandwiches on this one. I just wanted to make the very similar point that I believe we are extremely well served by our officers in this area. We have of necessity on occasions to borrow very large sums of money. The interests associated with those sums of money are equally large. And I think our team have had great success over the years in making sure that we get the very best interest rates that we can. And I have a high degree of confidence in their ability to do that going forward. Thank you.
Alan Watt, Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Convener. I'd just like to echo John and Deputy Provost's comments and congratulate Scott and his team and all the fantastic work that they do on our behalf. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Anyone else? Okay. Can we, and I also echo these sentiments.
So do I.
And I think it's what we've done on the finance front and on Treasury is impressive. So can we agree the report? Okay, we now move on to the final report of the day, and she has been waiting rather a long time, but Charlene Guild. And Charlene, I don't know if you want to go to the rostrum or what, but to introduce the important report on our transformation and change programme, especially as we're moving into phase 3. Charlene?
Thank you, Convener, and good afternoon, councillors. I'm pleased to present today's update on progress with phase 2 of the Council's Transformation and Change programme. The report before you covers the 6-month period from the 1st of October 2025 to the 31st of March 26, and also sets out how we are preparing to move into phase 3 from July this year. This work is taking place at a time of rising demand, reducing resources and increasing national expectations, which makes having a clear and focused approach to transformation more important than ever. As we progress, our direction continues to be informed by the Solace and Improvement Service National Transformation Programme, and we are actively involved both nationally and through regional collaboration where joint working can add value and reduce duplication. Members will also be aware that Audit Scotland's Best Value thematic audit, completed in August last year, provided important external validation of our approach. It highlighted our strengths in strategic framework, government arrangements, engagement with communities and reporting to members. It also challenged us to be more ambitious in setting out how transformation contributes to closing funding gaps, strengthening benefits realisation and impact reporting, as well as ensuring equality and fairness impact assessments are embedded proportionately across projects. During this reporting period, we have continued to make steady progress across the programme. And by way of illustration, this has included progress in Working Smarter project through securing shared property and tenancy arrangements with partners such as NHS Tayside, and our public transport in the community project, which has undertaken extensive public engagement. We have also expanded the overarching programme to include new projects focused on the education, workforce health and wellbeing, alongside automation within people and culture, which will help improve our use of data, digital tools and management information. Full detail of the progress of each individual project within the current programme is set out in the appendices, along with one-page overviews of projects and a focused case study on the artificial intelligence project and its future potential. Looking ahead to phase 3, the report proposes a sharper strategic focus. This includes clearer distinctions between transformation and business improvement projects, a more targeted portfolio focused on impact, efficiencies and savings, and strengthened governance through a clear 3-tier model. It also sets out proposals to bring together the Programme Management Office and Business Improvement Team into a single transformation and improvement team, alongside improvements to real-time benefits reporting and a mapping of current capacity across the organisation. Workshops with senior officers are already underway to help identify the next wave of transformation and innovation opportunities. And finally, partnership working remains a key enabler of this programme through our work with the Health and Social Care Partnership, regional partners, national programmes and the continued involvement of communities, staff and elected members in service design and delivery. I would now be happy to take any questions on the report and appendices. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene. Do we have any questions? Bailey Ahern and Chris.
Thank you, and thank you for a very comprehensive report. My question is on page 147 of the pack, which is project 11 of the Perth Secondary Estate Review. It's been going for 3.5 years, and I just wonder where we are with it. We've obviously, Perth High School would have been part of that, but we've obviously got 3 other secondary schools within Perth City that we need to be looking at. And have we made any decisions yet in that 3.5 years, and how far are we? And the closing date or the planned completion date of 30th of June 2028, is that a completion date of any changes in the schools, or is that just the project in terms of how we move forward? Thank you.
John Beveridge. I know David McCluskey's not here today. I think Brian Reid is probably about, but John.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Ahern. So the work's done to date is really the data and evidence gathering. So we've done a fair wee bit of work on that so far. We have also looked at condition surveys, school rolls, all the population data. So there's a fair bit of work being done to date. The date that you're referring to is a date that would be complete, not completion of the actual, review itself. So that's where we're at. But as was noted earlier, there's nothing more definitive in terms of an update on the secondary school estate review.
Chris?
Yeah, can I just ask a secondary to that?
Yes, surely.
At what point in that timescale would you be consulting elected members within the city centre as to where we are with that project? Thank you.
I think once we get more into the detail, Councillor Ahern, we will be consulting you fully on that along with other members. But at the moment we're not at that stage yet.
Thank you.
Councillor Ian James. Ian.
Thanks, Stuart. And in the spirit of Grant's question earlier, a report this size and this complex deserves a question or two. Mine is around the two, AI and automation, and I just love wordy documents, and the language used in the project description worries me. When overarching goal to leverage cutting edge technology and such like, says to me it's early stages and it may or may not work. I just want to know, Charlene, how heavily will we be reliant on AI? Because nothing more frustrating than trying to fix a problem over the phone and getting an AI answer which doesn't answer your question. And I just wonder at what sort of level we'll be using it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. And obviously there's a very recent briefing, but I'm going to go over to Stephen Watt, who was one of the three involved in that briefing along with Chris Wright and Alan Taylor. Stephen?
Yep, thank you, convener. And just on that point, which is a good one, totally understand the experience of dealing with organisations who have adopted AI tools, which we call agentic AI, is something that can be of frustration. We are in an early discovery phase with how we could capitalise on some of that technology in Perth and Kinross, and we're classing that as our digital front door, but we've not got any plans in place to implement any of it just now. We're still understanding the landscape, learning from other councils who have adopted it further to understand their lessons learned, and anything that we do in that space we will be bringing back through transformation and change and elected members briefings.
You okay with that, Ian? Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thanks for that. That's reassuring, to be honest, Stuart, because we're keeping the human interaction going, and that was my worry. Machines are great to a point, but they're only as good as the information that goes into them in the first place. So thank you.
No problems.
Yeah, it's all saying rubbish in, rubbish out. Yeah, but right, can we go on to Councillor Duff? John.
I hope that wasn't any kind of comment about my next sentence, convener. My question was page 109, but I thought obviously a lot of the commentary in the report is about joint working and collaboration, and it talks about working with our close neighbours in terms of Angus and Dundee, and our more regular kind of partnerships probably around about things like health and social care and NHS and such like. But I just wondered if we are looking beyond that and whether there are any other collaborations with councils further afield perhaps, or indeed whether COSLA has any involvement in this and assisting local authorities with transformation and change. Thanks.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Duff. So in terms of wider reaching collaboration, we have been working with other local authorities in terms of things like leadership development. I know that there has been some approach with East Ayrshire, for example, in terms of recruitment and different areas of organisational development, and there have been a number of different sort of collaborative efforts made more regionally. In terms of the involvement of COSLA, it tends to be led a little bit more at this point in time by the Improvement Service and Solace, who are leading on the National Transformation and Improvement Project, which has a number of different work streams and areas that we are involved in. So I'm the single point of contact. I was at a meeting yesterday. I'm giving updates to the Chief Executive and the Strategic Leadership team on the national programme, and that's something, again, that if elected members are interested in, we could certainly hold a briefing around just to keep everyone up to speed in terms of what's happening nationally.
Caroline Shires is not going to ask the question now. Councillor Stewart, Colin.
Thank you, Convener. Thanks for the report. In terms of moving forward to phase 3, excuse me while I try and find the right sentence. Yeah, in 6.1, there's mention of enabling a more targeted, or a number of recommendations have been discussed at the Transformation Board to enable a more targeted, sustainable and outcomes-focused approach. And I just wondered, in terms of the, if we look at Appendix 1 and some of the agreed project outcomes, whether as we move forward into phase 3, we might be looking at more statistical outcomes or numerical outcomes. So, for example, if I look at, I'm just picking one at random, but the customer services transformation and item 2 there is a delivery of recurring revenue savings. But should we be looking at more, you know, a delivery of recurring revenue savings of X £100,000, you know, so that there's measurable outcomes there rather than just a yes, no, whether there's, you know, because there would be no point in doing a transformation project if the delivery of revenue savings is £5.32. But if it was £532,000, then yes, absolutely, let's make the investment. So I just wondered whether we should have more specific agreed project outcomes.
Charlie.
Thanks for your question, Councillor Stewart. So as we approach phase 3 of the project, we are setting out quite a different programme, one that focuses much more on larger projects. So it probably has less projects within the transformation programme itself, but has much more clearly defined and measurable outcomes, as you're suggesting. We are looking at bigger projects that have greater outcomes, so things like employability in its widest sense, placemaking, poverty, so those sorts of things. What we're also suggesting is some of the projects within here are reclassified as business improvement, which will allow much more focus on things that are transformational, can focus on efficiencies, savings and improvement for services. So I hope that answers your question and helps.
Thanks. I think it does. I mean, if we took the poverty issue, for example, I attended, it was either the Anti-Poverty Task Force or the Community Planning Partnership or both, but we were using kind of proxy measures, and we weren't actually, for example, struck me, we weren't measuring the reduction in poverty or the number of, sorry, I'll move back so I can see you, Charlie. We weren't actually, you know, measuring the number of people lifted out of poverty or the reduction in poverty particularly well. And too often we're using proxy outcomes rather than, you know, specific, measurable, targeted. So I think I'm reassured by what you said, but I just want to sort of make the point more broadly that to the Transformation Board, that, it'd be really useful to see sort of much more measurable outcomes rather than a yes, no, I think, on when we're looking at transformation or any business improvement.
Charlene.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I mean, one of the things that we have been doing over the past probably around 6 months is working with our strategic leadership team on this. So really starting to focus down on the issues that have most impact for us as an organisation and those things that should wield the biggest outcomes moving forward. So longer term projects, but much clearer measurables, and actually working across services, teams and portfolios in the organisation to make sure that all of the different areas within things like poverty, which has a much wider and broader reach than just one service, are actually coming together to discuss a project in its entirety rather than just in different areas.
Councillor Lane Grant, I think this may be the last question.
Thanks, convener. I think this will be one for Ms Simpson to answer. She sat there patiently for about 3¼ hours. So obviously think procurement and commission is one of the major things that can have a big effect across Berwick and Ross about price and where we're commissioning it. So I'm a little bit on page 152 where it says the first one under outputs delivered since last update, and finance and resources is probably the right one to ask you this question. Is and number one, it says delivery is commenced although progress is slow due to resource restraints. Is this a capacity within or funding required to drive the action plan forward?
I think it's actually capacity within the team, just in terms of the volume of work, ordinary day-to-day business. It is a pressure. We've also got one member who's off on maternity leave that we can't replace because she's got a specialist skill set. But it's one of the things as well is that we've created more work for that team to do. It's almost been a little bit of a victim of its success because as it's improved internal processes and checks and is doing more proactive work to support strategic leads and service management teams to do planning and to try and explore new frameworks and develop different ways of accessing it. It's actually created more work on a day-to-day basis as that becomes embedded as business as usual. So part of the progress is slower because it's capacity within the team, because there's obviously a finite resource and there is also just an increasing volume in business.
Thanks for that. And maybe the Leaders' Council might want to bring that to leaders and conveners or something or maybe a briefing session for everyone just to show actually what it is and where it could go to, so that elected members are aware where good extra investment can have, give better rewards and quicker. So it would be good for, I think, maybe be set up for a briefing session to show where we can go with this, if you'd be willing to facilitate that.
It's actually quite tedious because at F&R in June we'll be bringing up the delivery plan for the which will give you an indication of the contracts that are coming, and that gives us a little bit of an opportunity. It's not the time for the annual report, but we usually use that as an opportunity to give you a bit of briefing about where we've got to with the work that we've done to date at the point of getting the new contract delivery plan for next year, in terms of giving you an indication of the business, and we can tell you what we know. We don't give you the formal annual report until after the summer because we need to wait for data coming back via Scotland Excel, but we would be able to give you some sort of briefing with highlights and tell you where we are in terms of the strategy that was approved as part of the transformation programme and how we're doing in terms of top numbers, in terms of increased local suppliers and etc. like that. So we could definitely bring some information back. That was something that would be, and it would be fortuitous to do it at that time.
puts that note down to bring that forward, it'd be really good. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, it will come up at F&R is clearly the delivery plan, and then we have a very detailed procurement report. Always, I think it's usually September that it comes about, but there's no doubting the importance of procurement, because you just save even 2-3% on your purchasing costs. Then, well, certainly if you're a company or not a company, then that feeds through in a much larger way to the bottom line, and it is an area we want to keep pushing on and move with pace on. Any further questions? Okay, I'm going to move the report. I want to thank everyone involved in the transformation and change programme. At times I think it can be challenging, but that's what we've got to do. And also the updates we've had on progress over the past 6 months. The whole programme is fundamentally about how we as a council remain sustainable in the face of rising demand, of constrained finances and increasing expectations, whilst at one and the same time protecting outcomes for people across Perth and Kinross, especially those who need us most. This report, it sets out the progress made so far. And I think the important thing for this committee, the key issue, is what happens next when we move into phase 3 from July of this year, and how that lines up with best value expectations on ambition, on governance, and crucially on benefits that can be demonstrated. We've also had a clear national message through Solace and the Improvement Service. Councils need to move beyond individual improvement projects and take a more joined up system-wide approach. That means putting more emphasis, more stress on prevention, on early intervention, better use of digital and data, whilst making sure we have a workforce that's sustainable. It also means being clearer about what's realistically deliverable within the funding we have, and working better with partners so we avoid duplication and make the most of limited capacity. Regionally, there's the opportunity to be more selective and purposeful about joint working, focusing on the areas where collaboration will genuinely accelerate delivery, strengthen resilience and improve value, with a focus on improving outcomes. Looking ahead, phase 3 should help us sharpen priorities, tighten the portfolio, so we focus time and resources on what makes the biggest difference. It also means proportionate governance, strong enough to provide control and assurance, but not so heavy it slows delivery. I very much welcome the intention to distinguish between transformation and business improvement, and to reclassify the current portfolio so that major strategic change has the right senior oversight, whilst other improvement activity can progress at pace. On page 116, you've got of the report, I think it's 116, the list of the 17 projects. That's going to be narrowed down clearly, and it will be much more a targeted approach. But if it is business improvement, that's still of vital importance, and it's almost kind of continuous improvement. I'm thinking the Japanese word kaizen, just to, continually ongoing improvement. You don't give up, but we need to identify what are the key strategic transformation projects. And there's also the transformation board with council officers. I think there's 3 things we continue to look for in future updates. 1, a clear line of sight between transformation activity and actual benefits, between savings and efficiencies, and set out transparently and tracked over time. 2, confidence that the council has sustainable capacity and arrangements beyond the current project management office term ending in June this year. And that includes the proposed consolidation into a single transformation and improvement function, and assurance that equality, fairness, meaningful engagement are embedded proportionately as projects develop. So I'm more than happy to support the recommendation that the committee notes the progress made and the proposed approach to developing phase 3. And just to conclude, I'm glad of what we've achieved, the road we've travelled so far, but there's further to go. And I think we need to accelerate matters and to move at pace. And that's what we owe to our citizens and council taxpayers. So I'm more than happy to move the report, and could ask Councillor Drysdale to second.
I second the report.
And we have 2 comments. Councillor Rebick. John.
Thank you very much. Again, Convener, just very briefly, I just want to thank Charlene and her team for the report, which I found quite interesting. Actually, I'm frustrated that I've got to look this way to speak to the mic, but I can't actually speak to Charlene when I'm speaking to her. But thank you for the report. Just another specific point briefly to make around because Perth City Secondary School Estate Review was mentioned, and I think it's important that whilst we're considering all these schools together for geographical connectivity, that we're not forgetting about the one rural school which will need work sooner rather than later, which is Blairgowrie High. I'm pretty sure that neither Councillor McEwen nor Councillor Shires will let us forget about that, of course, and quite right too, but just important to note that we're not forgetting about Blairgowrie High. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Councillor McEwen. Tom.
Thank you very much, Convener. I thought your presentation of the paper was very good, and the things that you said about this. We spent a lot of time in the last few months, I'll say, arguing over how we spend money, etc. And we did a lot of that today as well in this committee, talking about how to spend money. But this paper shows that that's not what it's all about. The actual transformation and changing how we provide services and who we work with and how we do it is actually vastly more important. And I'd actually like to see much more of this type of stuff coming to our briefing so that councillors across the chamber understand that this plays a much more important role in what we do and how we make decisions in the council than just rawly spending money does. I also want to take the opportunity to feather my own nest, because in the Health and Social Care Partnership transformation at 6.2, it talks about quality, safety and efficiency in prescribing programme. And one of the examples it uses actually something I'm personally involved with as a pharmacist, cardiology pharmacist in Tayside, where we changed a group of medicines that we're using to use something that was more cost effective, and it will save lots and lots of money across the whole of Tayside, not just within the Perth and Kinross Integrated Joint Board side of things. I would draw them up though that they comment on say that we prescribe something that is cheaper. I'm sorry, we would never describe the medicines we prescribe as pharmacists as cheaper. We prescribe them as cost effective. So no, it's not cheaper, it's cost effective. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Councillor Lane, maybe that comment.
And I'll be brief. I agree wholeheartedly with what everybody said so far on that, especially Councillor McEwen. These sort of projects give you confidence when you make a decision at the end that you're spending the money in the right way, because it's all evidenced the way through and looked at thoroughly, rather than ad hoc decisions where we spend money where there's not been a proven path. So I think it's very worthwhile. It shows a better way of spending money to look at things. The only thing I don't like about it is that the when it says project transformation will be complete in 2028. Transformation should never be complete. Transformation should be going on all the time. Should be no end date. There can be an update, but not an end date. So there you go. There's a pitch for your transformation position to continue for many more years to come. So thank you for all the work that you've done. Not you just, Charlene, but the teams that have provided the information that you've collated there and come forward and different things. So long may that continue. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I think you do need to set target dates, especially if it's a strategic project and then it moves towards continuous improvement. But yeah, we can. But I really do think these in the appendices, the project reports is actually very helpful for us as councillor in the many committees we serve on with the council, and it gives a lot of really helpful background information, and not just where we are, but where we might be going. Right, any further comment? Okay, can we agree the report? And it now been 1 minute past 5. We didn't quite make 5. I'm going to close the meeting. Thanks everyone, and that's been a long afternoon. Grateful to you all.